Hello and welcome to another episode of the IAMKAYPEE podcast, and today I'm joined by two of my favourite people, Natalie Portman and Khaled, the sultry sultan.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Pretty cool. Natalie Portman's here, dude. This is huge.
Natalie sends her apologies. She really wanted to be here, but she's busy saving the world.
Are you my stunt, Natalie? I think.
I guess so. Yeah.
So yeah, we all know each other through various reasons from over the years, but initially it was when you all went to university in Dundee.
We did do that.
Which is very random for a Canadian and someone who is from Kuwait.
Kuwait, yes.
Yeah.
To end up in a university in a small, well, it is a big art scene, but it's a small town compared to the rest of Scotland.
Yes, it's one that I find myself having to tell people that it exists a lot, let alone where, oh, shall we have a cheers?
Mm-hmm.
A cheers.
Yes, cheers.
Thank you for coming along.
Old Lang Syne or something.
Wouldn't it?
Cheers.
Woo, mahalo.
His old lungs. And yes, it's wine.
It is wine. Ooh.
It's good.
Yes.
We have a tendency to drink on this show, so
Yes.
people are pretty much used to it. And my pee breaks. If they're,
Yes.
if they're watching.
Hopefully the wine I don't buy beer, I just rent it. That's
Like I'm constantly peeing. If I drink beer, that's the worst part of it. I don't know what it does. It's just like there's some reaction in me and beer.
Oh, whoa, okay.
And as soon as, they call it breaking the seal. As soon as you go to the bathroom once, that's it.
you like to go immediately and throughout. So.
Once you pop, you can't stop.
So hopefully I'll be able to hold on throughout this whole show. So
Hopefully wine is a slightly gentler effect on the old bladder.
I think it does. I don't know.
I think so too, yeah, because I don't think it's like as diuretic,
Yeah.
and you don't drink as large a volume of it either.
I wonder what the mechanisms are that beer just attacks your bladder like that.
I think it's because it's sort of like, as far as I understand it, in terms of alcoholic drinks that are going to get you drunk, short of doing like a bunch of shots, beer is actually going to be worse than wine just because of, even though it's a lower ABV, it's just the volume of it that you end up drinking. So I think it's just a lot of liquid and also diuretic.
Yeah. Okay. So
All right.
you learn something every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or at least you heard something made up that sounds reasonably convincing.
So first things, how did you end up in Scotland actually, Cal? Like, this is something that I've always wanted to ask, and I don't think I asked it when we first all were hanging out. So
Yeah, no. Actually, the whole thing just, came together quite randomly. Basically,
it seems like
yeah, no. I was working in Kuwait, where I'm from and live, and pretty much I wanted to call it quits because I got frustrated with living there for many reasons, and I initially applied to grad school in Boston, got accepted, and thought about moving there, but it was going to be a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because Boston, and looking for an alternative, I just was scrolling through the UK because I was like, hey, 1 year programs, why not?
Right.
Easier on the wallet, etc., etc. World class, etc. But and then all of a sudden Dundee came up, and I'd never even been to Scotland before, so I just applied on a whim, just sort of winged the application. Yep, well, maybe we speak freely, right? Winged the application, got a response back being like, hey, we'd like to accept you. So, I resigned from work.
Was it from the late and great Mary herself?
It was Mary.
Mary Modine.
She's not dead. She's
No,
just not
no,
course
no.
director anymore.
No, she's very much alive
She
and awesome.
is.
That's right.
So yeah, that was how you ended up. But like, why Dundee? Like,
I just, I did a little bit of research into the school itself, and I just saw that, it was an actual legitimate university, great program, Duncan Jordanston, et cetera. All great stuff. So just hopped on a plane, came here, and
Yeah.
that's what happened.
and what was your experience of Dundee? Because it is a very sort of specific type of Scottish way of living, and the accent as well. Like, that can only be just two worlds colliding when you're speaking to people in Dundonian.
Well, I've actually lived around the world my whole life, so for some reason I just have some predisposition to understanding accents.
Right.
So, like the moment I landed in Dundee, I was like, hey, the accent isn't as furry as everyone else made it out to be.
There's this famous video going around. Have you seen it? It's this Billy guy who's Korean, I think he is.
Oh, yeah.
And he does all the accents from the UK, and he's specifically famous for doing the Dundonian accent.
Ooh.
And he's trying to teach people in South Korea or one of these Asian countries how the dialect and what it means. So if you ever visit there, they're going to have an understanding of what people are talking about. And his Dundonian one is hilarious. It's
on point.
No, it's terrible. It's like, and I want to talk about a pear. I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's like,
it's Korean Billy. That's his name on
Korean
YouTube.
Billy.
but it seems like it was like the best he could work out, having never heard it. Like presumably he must have visited or something, but it just seems like he's just read it all and is reciting it basically. But it's lovely.
A lot of these programs though are just like from people who've never actually been to these places. Like in Asia, like they set up these things. Like some people teach English and they've never even been to like England. Not that you need to, but at the same time, it's like there's these weird things that are going on that are not connected to the sort of source of the, you know.
Yeah. And I guess like knowing a language, speaking a language, and teaching a language are three different things in a way. So you might be really interested in one and not really interested in another, especially based on some French teachers I've had.
My French teacher, she was Irish.
Yeah.
She was living in Scotland and she was teaching French.
All right, several degrees of separation there.
And it was so strange. And there was one French teacher, she was German as well.
I had a German French teacher
too. That's so weird.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, in your mind, you're trying to put these two accents together and you can tell they have a sort of a different accent from normal French people. So it has this like tinge of German.
Yeah. I had a French teacher from New Zealand when I was in high school, and that was a cool accent.
Oh, wow.
She used to go around saying, Je m'appelle Führer. She didn't.
I assume not. No.
Zeke. Zeke Heil.
Oh, God. Are you sure you were in French class? You're not in, like, Young Aryans or something?
I mean, you know, the whole blonde hair, blue eyes
Yeah,
thing.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to start.
Master race specimen over here.
I used to be a hell of a lot more blonde when I was younger, like bleach white almost. That was my hair when I was young.
This is all starting to make sense now, Darren.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Well, even that photo we just saw from you in Greece, you like a lot blonder in that. It's weird.
Yeah, with the sun, I just get like really blonde. But yeah, that was a great sort of. We've been talking about this a lot, Laura and I, is when we all met up in Greece, because that's how we know each other mostly through. What was it, your guys? How would you explain the whole holiday and why it was there?
It was ostensibly a study trip.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was basically specifically where we went because of Elika, who'd graduated the same course the year before. She's from Greece and she has a studio there, etc. So I think it was pretty much based around having a person on the ground already. Yeah. But it was sort of like we had, I think it's basically just something that got put together to help promote the course, was the idea that we do have a study trip and we go somewhere cool.
Right.
Because I have done that, I think, every year. Not to the same place, but yeah. So a little bit tenuous, but
Yeah. It was a great trip.
it was amazing.
Oh my goodness.
I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that. And I didn't think it was something that you could experience. You know, I thought the only time that you could get that sort of feeling from a holiday is when you go on a lads type holiday. But it was like full of people who were educated and were all there for the same reason, art. And so they're going to be creative in different ways, but a different age range. So you got like a sort of feel from everyone's opinion on certain things throughout the whole trip, which was fantastic. It wasn't just a bunch of green, 18-year-olds going, oh, look at this. This is a Greek place.
Yeah, them 18-year-olds and the doing of that. No, it was especially interesting, I thought, having people's partners along on the trip, because you did get to speak to people you wouldn't ordinarily get to, which was interesting. Yeah, it was quite a good little group.
Yeah.
It was good. Yeah.
Definitely one. I saw the picture recently of when we did the pediment?
Oh yeah, on the beach. Yeah, that was fun.
So like if no one knows what a pediment is, usually you see them at top of like Greek and sort of Roman type buildings, and it's sort of two
it's that
triangles.
triangular part on top of the columns.
Yeah, on top of the columns, and usually they'll have something that's quite artistic or about something specific, like
they'll
maybe
have
a battle or
frieze.
something.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we did a human one on the beach
and
in
it was
Greece.
amazing.
It was very meta as well.
It was good. That was fun.
Although also closely rivaled by that one panorama shot that we took where we all cycled backwards and appeared
That
multiple times in the same picture.
Was amazing. Yeah,
Right.
we'd like discovered panorama on someone's phone basically that trip.
But one poor person was like grossly disfigured in those pictures.
There's always something, if you look too closely, it's like, ooh, a little too
So
close to the nuclear
how did it
reactor.
work? So basically, you had a certain amount of people, and you took a panoramic picture, and then when you got to the end of that, the people, then someone would run from the back round you and start it again. So
Yeah. So
you'd be in a circle, but it'd be the same people over
well,
and over.
it starts with one person holding the phone. So as you start the photo, basically the people that you leave behind will run behind you, and then you'll just sort of try to alternate the phone really smoothly, and then just appear, and then just person by person you run around back, grab the phone, let the other person pose. It worked.
We were
worked.
pretty good
Definitely had
at
to
it.
learn.
Yeah.
A couple of artists running amok in an olive grove.
Yeah, that was exactly. Oh, yeah, because that was the day we climbed up to the olive grove. And then remember, a shepherd brought us water.
This is true. Yeah, very biblical up there.
Yeah, it was
The
good.
only thing I remember from that is you dipping your hair in like this water.
Oh, and whipping it back.
It can only be described as like a barrel or a trough that sheep were drinking out of, and then you threw your head in it and threw it back. So it was like some sort of shampoo commercial.
We'd all been like,
And we were taking pictures when you would get your hair up. It was amazing.
it's
But
like
yeah.
a little mermaid on the mountain.
Mountain mermaid.
And I can
like
just
that.
see this really old shepherd staring at Cal like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, oh god, it was funny. But he basically came because his dog told him there were
Yeah.
people, pretty much, and he was like, "Why are there people?" So, it was good. And it was hot. I was an absolute cinder at that point, so I was just
because
put me in water.
my idea of Greece up until that point, out with what I knew about the history of it, was always just people going to sort of, like
Santorini.
like the kind of lads holiday,
Yeah.
girl group sort of type holidays. So when I was there, I was sort of like, oh yeah, I forgot there was so much history that comes from this place, the center of modern civilization, and a lot of sort of philosophy as well that comes with that, and just to see the physical place where that all took place was just mind blowing. Just to like the things you've read about in books at high school for years, and not having any context other than just your teacher telling you like this is what happened and thousands of years ago, and then we were there. Like looking at a fucking olive tree that was how many
They
years
were like
old?
800 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the oldest one was 2000.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Or when we were on Agina or Regina or however you want to say it.
There's a bit of dispute around
halfway overpronounce it or whatever. But when we were talking about like whatever, it was the naval battle of maybe it was like Salamis or something, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that was over there, like just there." And you're like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Because it's just stories up until that point, and then when you see, oh, that was Marathon, that's where the guy ran, from over here all the way over to there, and it's like, oh, it's not just a story anymore.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and it was cool to be on that particular island as well because it's right in the thick of it, but it's not really touristic. But like every civilization that's passed through that area has been on that island at some point, and it's so close to Athens, but it's not like
It's where the people from Athens go to holiday as well, which is always a good sign. Most people always tend to say that. Don't eat the Chinese where the Chinese people don't eat. Like
exactly.
with Chinese food, it's like one of those type of things.
Yeah.
Or I've found that though that if you eat where Chinese people go to a Chinese and eat, they tend to be like super sketchy as well. Like the type of places. There's one in Dundee that does real traditional Chinese food, and they have like a Westerners menu, and they have like a
the
real
authentic one,
tradition.
yeah.
I always love that, and I love how there's always one Westerner who's convinced that they want whatever the
And they
thing
get,
is,
like,
and they
a
get
lamb's head.
Yeah, exactly.
With one eye.
Oh, eating in China. Yeah, that's a different animal altogether. No pun intended.
So you have actually traveled like constantly. Have you ever not been traveling? Like, when did you start, and what, like, did you have an interest from when you were younger, growing up in Kuwait? Was it always your idea to go traveling?
I actually never lived in Kuwait up until I moved there when I was 18.
Okay, so where are you from then?
Well, originally Kuwaiti.
Okay.
Both of the parents are Kuwaiti, but my dad used to work for the airlines, so we got pinged around from place to place, and just it varied depending on where he was posted. So we were in some places longer than others. So, I guess just I had that travel bug sort of programmed into me that every few years you just move. And just being curious myself, especially coming from a place like Kuwait and relocating there when you're older, it's just, the beauty of Kuwait is just it's centrally located. So the rest of the world, 7 hours you're in London, 7 hours you're in Bangkok, and everything in between is fair game.
Yeah.
So just to,
So you didn't
there was an
include
opportunity
America
and
there.
boom. And the US. Hey.
No one wants to go there.
Not anymore.
But yeah, so you've always just felt like you wanted to, well, not wanted to, but you just had to.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, no, and I'm curious enough to do it. So alone, with people, whatever, just, hop on a plane and get somewhere.
Have you done Asia? Is that part of your traveling
Asia?
plans? Yes.
I used to live in India. So like I did quite a bit of Asia back then.
Okay.
And just in the last 3 years, I finally got out to China and Japan and Korea.
No way.
Yeah.
Tell Darren
Holy
about
shit.
the luggage in Japan.
Darren, man. I've already brought Laura up to speed on this.
This
but
is my dream to pay for it. Yeah.
No, but like Japan just does everything. Like there's a mindfulness to everything that is done in Japan. Like basically, as soon as we got to the airport in Narita, when the bags came out on the conveyor belt, all of the bags are tilted upwards with the handles outward towards you.
What?
Yeah.
That's insane.
So you just grab it right off the belt, and at first I was like, okay, this clearly has to be a fluke. So when I flew from Haneda to Osaka,
yeah.
I saw every single belt with bags that was coming out. All the bags just had the handles pivoted outwards, and they
No
were all
way.
stood up on their side. It is what they do.
And I bet if you go outside, you're not going to see what it's like in the UK, where they're just humping these bags off of one area to another, just throwing them. Like,
Yeah,
I
brief
love it.
airborne.
Yeah. I remember arriving, I don't know where I traveled to, but someone's suitcase had arrived and it looked like it was old enough, like maybe from the 70s. And it was one of those ones that it's like a hard shell on the outside, almost like a big briefcase, but with a hard plastic shell, with then like textile on the inside. And it was like, it had smashed like a creme brulee. So the whole case was just in pieces around,
It's like
just
porcelain.
the
The
cloth inside
content,
was
yeah.
left.
Oh man.
have you had any sort of problems while you're traveling? Like, what is something that sticks in your memory? And I'll put that to everyone here as well.
You're gonna have to come back to me on that
Okay.
because so far I'm, like knock on wood, right? Like I've had pretty shenanigan-free travel. Although when I went to Japan, I did land in the middle of a typhoon.
Sweet.
So that's
Why would you do that?
Well, I made the mistake of going in August, which
Okay.
is not only like the hot, humid season of the year, but also there's a lot of storms and typhoons that come through. So we were getting delayed out of Doha because there was a huge series of typhoons coming like through Tokyo.
Wow.
And then essentially when we were flying over, they shut down the airport just shortly when we were on approach, and we were like the second to last flight to land before they shut down. So as we were coming down, the plane just starts like violently pivoting left to right.
Sweet.
Yeah, and then at one point I just look, you look outside the window and you could see the runway lights just right outside. And you're like, all right, I'm going to be on Wikipedia today. So
That's funny.
it's a little hairy, but
Imagine being the plane that came behind you. Obviously, you were second to last, weren't you? So
Yeah.
there was one other plane to come.
yeah,
That
but
must be-
like just winds gusting through. So really it's just
Yeah, I've never really.
planes.
I mean, how do you feel about that type of weather on a plane? Well, not on or in a plane, but like turbulence. Do you get sort of freaked out by that? But people that travel a lot are usually quite accepting of it.
Oh God, no. I am a shit traveler.
Really?
Like, oh yeah, no. Like just fear of God. Like the plane starts shaking. I'm like, oh no, let's just get through this shit.
Yeah.
So
I love that you are addicted to traveling, but you're very uneasy on airplanes. It's
Really?
quite funny.
it's horrible. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm exceptionally skittish on planes.
It's just like a masochist, basically. Let's just fly all the time.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I don't
Well,
get.
I know you are a sadomasochist. But
Yeah, I'm a tense traveler in terms of logistics, but I'm turbulent. I love turbulence because everyone else has to sit down then, basically, and I get a bit of a relaxation.
Yeah.
I've had one very sharp banking in a plane that was my like, oh, it's statistics time, like airplane accidents with more than 50 fatalities. Here we come. But it's over in like a second, and like, oh, it's actually fine. It's cool.
You're always pretty like, obviously this leads into you being sadistic, but every time we're about to go traveling, you're always like reading up on plane fatalities and how many people have died.
Yeah, well, it's the same as my like. all the kind of deep dives I do into stuff where it's like, this is something that's slightly alarming, so I think I'll read about it and at least I'll know what's up with it kind of thing. And it's actually really reassuring when you do read stuff like that, because it is an exhaustive list.
Yeah.
Unlike if you tried to read about car accidents, you'd be at it forever. So,
We just keep updating while you're reading it as well.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, real time.
It's
Like
supposed to be
stock
one of the
market.
biggest killers in the US is in traffic.
Oh, like traffic fatalities.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
think-
believe that.
I think Kuwait has the world's highest though per capita.
Really?
Yeah, no. Kuwait, you know, they have spectacular car accidents, and you know,
Huh.
in the negative sense, but just right. I mean,
I mean,
I thought you
depending on
meant
how you
like
look at it.
flamboyant sort of car crashes where they're all like,
I mean, listen, like I've never been to any other country in the world where you see so many cars, you know, old, new, whatever, and every single car is just
Right.
banged up. You know,
okay.
driving into a pole here, dings there, fender bender. You know,
I think America's
Huh.
quite similar. Like you'll see cars that are pretty rusted on the road that would never be on a road over here. Like
Yeah.
in the UK, they're so specific about what is drivable in the UK. So when I lived in Louisiana, and I could just see like cars, pickup trucks with holes in the side, you know, that weren't meant to be there, obviously.
they had holes in the top, but that's on purpose. Yeah.
and like cars that weren't even like a paint color; it was just rust,
yeah,
like completely.
at that point.
And so you would think that it's pretty bad driving over in Kuwait.
It's, you know, in Kuwait, it's a combination of negligence and just malice. So, you know, just, you know, you turn on an indicator and then the person behind you just speeds up and everyone else just proceeds to follow suit, and people driving the hard shoulders.
Oh my God, that sounds fun.
Yeah, no, what cool.
Would you say they have the right amount of, well, not the right, because that's, you know, subjective, but do you think they have the same amount of laws in terms of driving as they do here, but they're maybe just not?
Well, let me give you
people don't care really.
Well, let me give you an image. I mean, Kuwait is pretty lawless in so far that basically there's a lot of laws that exist, but basically because Kuwaitis are preconditioned for, you know, through a variety of reasons to being very unaccountable. They pretty much, you know, they get anything done and they don't fear consequence. Like basically when I did my driving test, I drove around for about maybe a collective 10 hours worth of driving. And then when I took the driving test, I took mine in English. And they gave me like this, you know, this completely nonsensical multiple choice quiz, you know, where the questions don't even make sense. Like stop, mean, green, go. And you're like, okay, I'm guessing A. You know what I mean?
Maybe this is secretly psychological and not in fact about the rules of the road. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the actual practical part, the guys told me just parallel park, which I failed. 10 minutes later, I had a license. You know, you may operate a motor vehicle now, legally.
Interesting. Okay.
That's a big one here. If you can't parallel park, then they're not giving you your
Oh, no, you're
license.
done.
Yeah. I remember that from learning to drive in Canada as well. I mean, like, guys, I could just avoid doing this. I don't have to do this ever. You know, I'm never going to get parking in Toronto anyway. Like, what's the point? Just drive around.
The roads are huge anyway.
They're huge, but they're full. And Torontonians are also maniac drivers, but we have a stunning number of pedestrian fatalities, apparently.
Yeah, that is strange for a country that's sort of notoriously nice.
Yeah, because everywhere has to have that one place. I was trying to think of something not super rude to say.
I think when you see someone driving, I think that is a sort of an indicator of how secretly angry they are. When you like see them, I mean, I'm the same. Like, very nice from day to day. You know, don't get riled up too much. In the car, if someone, you know, because it's a life and death situation when you're going at speed and high speed, and if someone's being stupid, that's out of your control. So then you could possibly die
As a
from
result of
someone
someone
else's
else's
action.
idiocy.
Yeah.
So I think that's why people get so worked up about it. But I think because Canadians on the whole are quite nice, and they have all this pent upness, they just go crazy in the cars. And
Perhaps. Yeah. Yeah, and
What do you
Toronto is genuinely, like, maybe compared to, you know, other metropolises, metropoli, whatever. It's not that overwhelming, but if you're coming in from, like, somewhere out in the sticks, it's pretty dense traffic as well, and I can see it would be a bit overstimulating. Plus, pedestrians seem to just want to step out in front of cars as well, which is cool. So we were talking about that earlier, that people just, like, assume it's your responsibility not to hit them, and of course you don't want to, but somebody doesn't give you any warning.
Well, I went on a sort of YouTube wormhole, and it was going to start out with, you know, Kuwait and sort of the history and whatever, and what it's went through just in preparation. But I ended up on people who were just walking across the lights at traffic lights when cars had the right of way, and just like had headphones in. And then there was one guy who just completely ignored the car, and the car like almost hit him. Got to the other side of the road. I still had his headphones in, and then the car peeped his horn. The guy turned around and gave him the finger.
Wait, this was in Kuwait?
No.
Oh,
this was in the
just
UK.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went on
That's
that kind
funny.
of. So I didn't get there. I went down that rabbit hole.
It's good to have a rabbit hole.
Yeah. But when I've heard, I have another friend who's called Khaled as well, and he's from Kuwait as well. Yeah.
Oh.
We call him Judo Khaled because he does judo. When I heard he was from Kuwait, and you told me that you were from Kuwait as well. From the images from when I was younger, it seemed like that was a strange thing to me for someone to be like from there and not seem sort of like, you know, they've came from somewhere that was war torn at one point, you know. And it seems, you know, you're obviously Khaled, you know, you're well spoken and all this, and you're like educated. Not that this is, you know, an indicator, but I always thought of it as a place that just had so much turmoil, and to sort of see these people just being like you and my other friend Khaled, who were just here, and that kind of just put that to bed for me that it is it's a good place now.
Well, depending on how you look at it. I mean, you know, it's
compared to what they went through.
Well, I mean, you know, the invasion in 1990 and, you know, the liberation in 1991, you know, there's still very much fragments of it left behind. And, you know, like there is this eternal dark cloud lingering over Kuwait where basically if it happened once, it can happen again. Yeah. So, you know, and especially Kuwait, let's be real. Like, look at the neighborhood that it's in. Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia all around you. So, it, you know, things don't look too good in the neighborhood. But, and so everyone there's just this fear of, you know, disaster striking once more, even though things have been pretty okay since then. And
it's the same with like Beirut. Like a lot of people thought, you know, that was just like, don't go there because of what happened. But now it's just money. Is it like filled with money now?
I went to Beirut in April, and I hadn't been there since 2006. So like at that point, I went just before the giant war with Israel and all the bombing and stuff. But you know, when I went back there, I personally don't like Beirut, but only because it's, especially now with the, you know, in the aftermath of the Syrian civil war, there's a lot of refugees there, and sort of there's these two very stark realities that exist side by side, where you have essentially a lot of wealthy locals and visitors who come over, you know, just to burn through a lot of money in the casinos and the bars and everything, and they just drive down these roads with these, you know, these buildings that are just grafted into a neighborhood with all these other war-torn buildings from the 80s,
right?
Wow.
And refugees sleeping on the sidewalks right by them. So there's just, you know, these two very strong opposing images that just coexist. So it's like a very uncomfortable place to be.
Like a Middle Eastern sort of Las Vegas, you know, because there's a lot of money in Las Vegas, but there's a lot of just like actual extreme poverty as well, because of a result of having the casino and the money coming in, and it just leaves as, you know, as soon as, because it doesn't stay there.
Yeah,
people aren't spending money in the rest of Las Vegas. It just it stays within these casinos.
Yeah. I think people can sometimes, because I think there are a lot of sort of holiday destinations where you go and you end up being kind of in tourist jail, and there's stuff going on around you that you don't get to see, but you know it's going on in terms of people having, you know, not a very good quality of life. And I think it's easy for people to say like, oh, well, people exculpate themselves by saying, oh, we're like contributing to the economy, but it's not what's happening at all.
That's why I always hated those holidays to Spain and Malaga and Palma Nova and Mallorca and these type of things, because you're sort of screened off from that country. You're in this little bubble that's in this other country.
Yeah.
And you don't get to experience anything. You know, there's just British pubs that do fry-ups all the way down the streets. You know, it's Little Britain with just the heat. That's all it is. And it's
you go somewhere else just to be surrounded by what you're familiar with.
And it's an extension of the US, not the US, Britain. That's all it is. And it's not a good feeling. You know, you want to go there and experience other culture.
Yeah, for sure. It's sort of went on not many, but like one or two maybe holidays in sort of the Caribbean and Mexico as a little kid. And it's not the kind of holiday my parents really like either, but it was with like family friends and stuff like that. And just feeling like, oh, we're in this beautiful place, but like we basically might as well not be, because it's just like there's a beach and it's really nice and there's swimming pools and stuff. But
it's like Cancun, like supposedly that's just filled with people that are going there for spring break and all these types of things.
Spring break, woo!
And you call back. That was our chant while we were. Yeah, like you just associate that with spring break as opposed to it being in South America.
Yeah. And then the thing is, wherever you're staying, you can bet everybody who works there is a local, and nobody who stays there is a local. And it's just this weird division where they come in and they work for you, and then they can't stay there and they have to go home. And it's weird.
Have you ever been to a place and faced any sort of like blowback from you being there as a tourist?
Not so much as a tourist. I mean, I've gotten some weird looks in the U.S., or funny reactions just by being an Arab, and just coming up sort of, I'm fortunate enough not to have had any weird racist or violent things happen to me, right? Knock on wood. But
I mean, that was one of the things that I was surprised when you said before you've not had any sort of bad experiences while you've been traveling. And for a lot of people that are Arab or even there was a lot of people who were Sikh during the 9/11 that got picked on because of just being remotely somewhat darker
Yeah,
skinned.
because people just don't know what's what. Yeah,
especially in America, it can be extremely ignorant to these types of things. So anyway, continue. I was just
I don't know. I forgot the question.
And I was talking. Yeah, like it was just. Oh, Laurie, you'll remember because
no, it's fine.
You're a supercomputer.
And you may. I'm a medium computer now.
No, your name's Hal.
Hal.
That's pretty good. I like to call you Kal-El. Do you know what that's from?
No.
It's from Superman.
No.
Superman's real name is called Kal-El.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That much I know. Otherwise, it stops there. It's pretty shallow.
No, and you may not want to talk about this, but I remember you telling me a story about traveling to the U.S. and having trouble with the border and the guy being an arse. But
no, that's happy to regurgitate that story. But,
it's entertaining.
Yeah, no, I flew into JFK and got off a flight from Kuwait. And, obviously I have a pretty American North American accent, but when I arrived, I pulled out my Kuwaiti passport, and the guard, looks at it, flips through, and he's like, "So, Kuwait, huh?" and instantly, I'm just like, "All right, crack the knuckles. We're going to be here a while."
Yeah.
Did he put his gloves on?
Well, no. If he did, at least I would have had a little more respect for him. But basically, it was just, he just brought up all these images. He's like, what's it like there? Do you guys have any statues of George Bush there? So, and obviously just putting me.
Yeah, they're all burned to the
Just
ground.
trying to piss you off.
Exactly.
As well.
So I'm trying to keep it cool because obviously I want to be granted access to this country.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Don't you think that you guys should have statues there, considering what he did for your country and for you guys?" And I'm just like, "Please let me into your country." So
why do we have to do this?
Absolutely. So a couple of soul-crushing minutes later, he stamps my passport, and when he hands it back to me, he's like, "Enjoy your stay. God bless America." Yeah.
Like, even if you were a terrorist, like, why would you then him trying to blackmail you into not being a terrorist? Like,
don't make me uncomfortable to be
do you
here,
have
man.
statues of George Bush? Like, he's done a lot for you. It's not going to, if you are a terrorist or whatever, it's not going to dissuade you from doing anything.
Yeah, don't piss off the potential terrorist. Which I'm not.
On the record, ladies and gentlemen, no. I'd read it more.
We're all potential terrorists.
It's true.
If you look at the world in a weird way.
Yeah, everybody is.
Everyone's a potential terrorist.
Yeah. I'd read it more as him just trying to needle Cal enough into giving him an excuse to be even more shitty, as opposed to actually thinking it was like a security issue. It's just like, yeah. If
was
you
it
have
TSA?
any...
It was just border control, like the guy stamping your passport.
This is before they started getting heavy with TSA, was it? Or were they around?
No, TSA was has been around forever. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe pre 9/11, but they ratcheted up their standards. But no, border control is different. TSA is mostly the security lines, which also suck.
Yeah. I was gonna say a thing. Is that sort of the equivalent of whenever you get asked by any official person a bunch of questions and they ask a bunch of them at the same time and you don't know whether they're an idiot or
Yeah.
they're trying to
Yeah.
confuse you
Oh,
enough
yeah.
to say something. Like, because I've been detained at the border by the UK border control.
I thought you meant when you were trying to get past the Mexico
Oh,
border.
that's, I don't know if
She
you've
was
heard
the-
that story.
I don't
Never
think
heard
so.
this. One of my favorite stories about Laura was that the border security from South America to
Well, I was with my parents on a cruise and we had stopped in Mexico. It was a cruise out of Miami and
sorry, could we get a story wine actually?
oh, a story wine. Yeah, we can do that. I can do a little top up. I
Sorry
cannot,
to interrupt,
however,
but-
when I'm off duty, pour and talk at the same time.
I'll
That's
do
a
it then.
professional. Oh, okay, cool. I was just gonna awkwardly mutely pour wine on your yeah.
You can never mutely do anything, Laura.
Oh, I see how it is. You're not wrong, but yeah. So I was on this cruise with my parents, and we'd been to a stop in I think Tulum, and we were getting back on the boat, and I was a bit behind my parents. My mom was holding my passport, and especially when I was a kid, if I tan super dark, and I think I was wearing kind of like maybe like cut off jean shorts and like a peasant blouse kind of vibe. I was like.
That's racist.
Like 9 maybe years old. That's a style of blouse. Google it.
You heard it here. Laura's racist as fuck.
I'm a blouse racist.
No, you're peasant racist.
And they were doing a passport check to get back onto this boat, and I'm a little bit behind my parents, and this lady who was doing the passport checks sees me in the queue, like grabs me out of the queue, pulls me out of the queue, and starts yelling at me in Spanish. And
Thinking
I'm
that you
like,
were just some vagrant child.
just some like random, or like my parents were stealing me or something like that. And I don't have my passport on me because my mom's holding it because I'm a literal child. And my parents were ahead of me, so they didn't notice I was gone for like what felt like a very long time. It probably wasn't that long. And then they had to go, and then they had my passport, and it was fine. But I was getting like, she was like holding onto my shirt and like, blah, 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 and I was like, ah.
Oh goodness.
So that's the story of how I almost became a Mexican child.
Or not a Mexican child.
Yeah,
Because you were managed to be able to get past them.
that's true. I almost got away with it too.
Shall we cheers?
Cheers.
Part 2.
Thank you for
Part two.
coming on, Cal, actually.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
When I actually first started the show back in 2000 and I took a break off, but it was essentially after we had went to Athens, but I'd always thought I would get you on because you've got an amazing voice and
Thank you very
you've
much.
got some
Salty
like an
salted.
amazing perspective on the world,
Thank you, Darren.
you know, to be from the Middle East and also be sort of
A citizen of the world.
yeah,
Oh,
like
goodness.
you're definitely sort of like a multicultural man just by your experience.
Third culture kid,
Yeah.
or whatever the term is. Yeah.
Is there a term? Has someone called you this?
Third culture kid. It seems to be a thing.
What?
Interesting.
Yeah.
What would be the third culture? Oh, the
Martian.
Earth. Planet Earth.
No, I think
yeah.
it was funny because my first impression when I met you was like, oh my God, this guy, is he Canadian? Like, you sounded really
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Canadian.
Yeah,
you
you
had
do
actually
have a
lived in
excellent.
Toronto as well, but I
Yeah,
think you're
you
the
do.
most international person I've ever met
Yeah.
in terms of like places lived and visited. And yeah.
International man of non-mystery.
Yeah.
Ah,
Alleged
Or
international
allegedly.
man. Yeah.
allegedly, exactly.
Some
Gotta
people
keep it
think
interesting.
some people think your dad's a spy.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people think my dad's a spy.
It's the scar, really.
It's all sorts of, yeah. Ethnically ambiguous.
Multiple passports.
Yeah. Suspicious.
Multiple
dude.
passports.
Yeah.
Ah, all right.
Yeah, he has a British one.
Yeah.
Does he? I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's expired now. I think
Okay.
he needs to renew it, but not that we should dox my dad on.
Don't let him in.
But yeah, I've convinced a number of people that he's a spy, and
Yeah.
it's not that hard to do that. But actually, funnily enough, my parents were asking after you, and when I
Oh,
said
really?
sort of what you're
Oh.
up to these days, they were like, "So what's he really doing?" So
Consulting.
exactly, that's the most euphemistic. Like,
It's the most specific general term you can ever
Yeah,
use
exactly.
for an
Absolutely. Whatever
What do
you
you
need me to
do?
do. Exactly.
Consulting.
so they were suggesting like money laundering or like alleged
Engineering,
international
financial.
You're
yeah.
spreading
Yeah.
a cult, maybe. You're spreading
be
a
a
cult.
cult.
Yeah.
Co-
The cult of Cal.
consultancy.
The
cult
cult.
with a K. The cult.
He's gonna get sued by Yakult, though, unfortunately.
So, just to sort of bring it back to you being weird, obviously, because you're not from here. Christmas is almost upon us. So, you grew up in a place, do they celebrate? Is there people that within that country that
Does
celebrate
Santa Claus come to Kuwait?
Christmas? Or
I don't think he wants to.
Was your first experience of an actual Christmas being in a different country?
Well, you know, I went to international schools all my life, so
Okay.
you know, just by virtue of being there, you know, with an American curriculum, Christmas is just a thing that you see.
Oh, right.
So it became a natural part of me, and you know, and just you know, the trees and the mistletoe and all that nonsense. But basically, at home in Kuwait, obviously, we quote unquote Muslims.
Yeah, demographically.
Demographically, yeah, you know, that we don't celebrate Christmas, and in Kuwait specifically, you know, any non-Muslim holidays are classified as idolatry. So you know, like they don't have Christmas trees up, and you don't mention the word Christmas, etc.
Wow.
So
Is it still like this?
Yeah.
Wow.
mm,
It just seems like for something that is so forward and progressive in a way, and then to hear things like that, it's just like, wow, you're still sort of having to fight with those type of things within yourself. You know, you're someone that's been to an international school, but then your base is somewhere that would sort of punish you for even talking about a holiday.
yeah, and you know, like this sort of non sequiturs into a side conversation, but even like for my own personal, you know, identity as a Kuwaiti, you know, like when I moved to Kuwait in 2007, you know, I was 18, so in the height of, you know, my towards the end of my teenage angst, really.
Are you
Or
allowed
is
to be
it?
angsty?
But you know, like I went to Kuwait, and basically my entire life, because Kuwait for me was always the place you go to for spring and summer
Yeah.
holidays. So you know, it's romanticized, and it's the place where you go to have fun. So when I moved back there as, you know, as a citizen and as an adult, it was jarring for me, because all of a sudden I walked into a place that had these very strong societal expectations of me,
Right.
and these cultural norms that, you know, necessarily you don't affiliate to or agree with,
Yeah.
and you're expected to, you know, be a part of them, no questions asked, because that's just what you do. So all of a sudden, you know, you find yourself sort of self-doubting and fighting against the system, and just I collapsed into like this very angry,
Wow.
like isolated ball, just, you know, keeping to myself about it rather than engaging with it, which exists and continues in some form to this day.
Of course, you know, you can't. Those are two parallels that are sort of hard to. But I think you've done a great job of being able to sort of balance those two things. Like you as a person, like it's never made you, like in any sort of way, a sort of tormented character. You know, you're extremely nice. You know,
Thank you.
and you travel a lot, and at the same time, you know where you come from as well, and you're not sort of trying to fight that.
Well, you know, I mean, it's funny, but you know, when I was in Kuwait, like during university, I was pissed off for all 4 years of it. But there was one of my professors who just, you know, she looked at me and was just like, you know, ultimately, you make the experience no matter where you are. And
Yeah.
just, you know, just that simple,
Yeah.
you know, like that, just like that phrase knocked some sense into me. And I was like, you know what? I'm like, I hate it here, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be just a dismal existence. So
Yeah.
just,
Are you talking about Dundee?
no, Dundee was great.
Spring break.
Yeah, and I guess there to a certain extent, no matter what we're doing, we can't all be all of ourselves all the time. Like if you're at work, you know, you have to behave in certain ways. When you're with your family, you have to behave in certain ways. Like, but at the same time, that's a long time to have kind of gone from relative freedom to a relative lack of freedom, while also being somewhere that's supposed to be home. Like it's a strange situation.
And then so I'm quite like admire you a lot for that, because you see shades of sort of society that Laura and I would not sort of be able, or have the sort of palette to see. You know, those are things that you've experienced on both sides or on all sides, and are able to sort of take that in. And for us, it's quite, you know, we've never been to the Middle East or any of these that type of place, so it's hard for us to sort of comprehend it. And you're able to do that, like you're sort of.
Well, you know, I mean, the whole, you know, the Middle East, I think, in, you know, as a whole, is just, it's very conflicted, because all of a sudden, you know, with all, you know, all the states in the Gulf sort of, you know, became independent between the 60s and 70s. So as far as sovereignty goes, these are relatively young nations that came into a lot of money very quickly.
Yeah.
So especially now that, let's say, Generation 1, which we'll call like my parents' generation, so people born in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
So those people essentially were the first recipients of of like that state of money and opening up to the rest of the world. So now people like me, like the millennials, you know, 1980 onwards, we're a lot more connected to the rest of the world just by force of exposure, technology, etc. So now the entire Gulf, and I'll just say that, is sort of, it's experiencing this conflict of identity between like these young people who've seen a lot, traveled a lot, and want to sort of open up,
Yeah.
you know, the you know, all the stuff that culture and tradition have bound them to. And there's a very powerful older generation which still mandates that kind of traditionalist core. And now there's just that conflict between the two of, you know, do we go this way, do we go that way, and where's the happy medium?
It's hard.
I think we can certainly relate to that, admittedly, and maybe a watered down version in the UK right now in terms of Brexit and how the younger generation.
It's a very basic form of that Brexit, you know, but you grow up as a person in our generation roughly, and you have these opportunities and you can travel freely and work freely in Europe. You form relationships doing that, and then you get dragged out of that. It's sort of unfair to get given something and have it taken away again. But as someone that's sort of somewhat of an outsider to all this, how do you perceive Brexit and this whole thing that's happening?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, you know, my knowledge of Brexit is pretty rudimentary, only because, you know, because of my American upbringing, I tend to focus more on the US and get infuriated by Trump's shenanigans.
There's enough to focus on there as well.
Exactly.
Oh, God.
But, you know, Brexit, I think because of my own personal affiliation with Scotland, you know, I'm a little bit angsty personally just towards the whole fact that they're being dragged out of the Union because of a choice made by the South.
Yeah.
Yep.
The South. So, yeah, just trying to keep up with the details of it has been a little bit tricky, but Laura's been quite good at bringing me up to speed on that.
I gave Cal a hot recap on it.
Even if you're from the UK, it's very hard to sort of keep up with all the terminology they're using. Like, they're coming up with things that they're sort of coining and phrasing, and then it evaporates as quickly as it sort of appears. So it's so hard to sort of understand where it's at this point.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, we generally thought with this vote this week that she would be, you know, voted out in some sort of way. Theresa May, which one I'm talking about, and it's not happened.
It's just been such a weird, and it was there because of Darren's phone not working at the moment, and so it's like whenever you're out of the house,
I
for
dropped
work,
it several times.
To be fair, I also dropped a glass on it as well.
That was the catalyst.
I don't just break a glass when I drop a glass. Sometimes I break a couple things when I drop a glass. But there was one day and you'd gone out and you'd been out for like 2 hours and you came back for lunch, I think, and it was like, oh my God, you won't believe what's happened, because there was a bunch of Trump stuff had come to a head. And then I think that was when they had decided not to vote. The government had decided not to continue with a vote in Parliament on the Brexit deal because they didn't think they would win. And it's like, that's sort of the point of voting, guys. That's
and this is where I think you're very much right, Laura, in saying that.
Ooh.
Not often I say that. You're very much right. No, I just say it all the time. She says it all the time, actually.
I am always right.
In that, if this wasn't Brexit and it was some other issue, then she would have been out on her ass. But because it's Brexit and it's such a fucking quagmire, like no one wants to traverse this, so they're just trying to keep her in. And I think that the feeling was that she wanted to stay and get through Brexit, and then when the general election comes up, then she would disappear. That's what she's saying. So that's what she said for the rest of her party to keep her in power. Yeah.
In which case, the thing I struggle with this, and I believe that is the case, but you'd have to have such like psychotically high self-esteem that she still thinks she can sort it out, basically.
If she dances like the way she does in front of cameras, you obviously think you're an amazing person.
True.
Have you seen her?
I have not.
She looks like
my God. Okay.
She's like a robot with arthritis.
You know how she already looks like she's like 3 people standing on each other's shoulders, like that, plus like awkward mom dancing. It's amazing.
Just like extendable go-go gadget arms as well. Like
it's so we're doing after the podcast. We're gonna be watching some. But because I remember, and I need to try and find it, but I'd read an article when she first came into power, such as it is, about how she's basically, in terms of her social background and her educational background, just a product of so much self-confidence, which seems like it would be sort of a dynamic thing, but in her case it seems to be this sort of like weirdly passive thing.
I think if you're female and in that sort of job, then you have to have some sort of above your sort of actual like she's not self-aware completely, and she thinks she's like completely just this god level being,
Yeah, it's quite fat. I think.
Because you have to have like this undeniable self-belief to get in a position like that as a woman, you know.
Yeah, and you have to be used to
Sometimes,
projecting like firmness and toughness
of course,
and all that.
yeah.
But
That's what I'm trying to get at. I'm not saying that you have to like be delusional, but you have to
but it helps. I know.
you have to project, you know, and be like, you know, this, I want this job, so I'm going to just stand for no bullshit or whatever.
Yeah.
Not that she does that, because I think she thinks she's like Margaret Thatcher, and I've mentioned this before, but Margaret Thatcher is a terrible person, but she had a spine, you know, and Theresa May is completely spineless. You know, she's just this symbiote.
Yeah, and I think that's what I mean by kind of like the passive self-esteem. It's like she doesn't seem to stand for anything in particular, but by God, she's not going to get out of the way.
She can't even stand for herself.
Exactly, yeah.
You've seen her trying to walk across the stage.
Oh, with her like size 14 and kitten heels. Oh God. And I'm not making fun of her appearance because she's a woman. I would equally make fun of a man's appearance in this situation, especially if he wore kitten heels. So,
what's the whole political situation in Kuwait? Because it's not one you hear, you know, on the news that much over here.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because actually Kuwait is one of those places in the world where basically you can talk about a lot of things, and, you know, credit to Kuwait, it has a relatively free press, but government and the emir is not something that you talk about.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah.
But, you know, personal, like, you know, just to give you like a high and mighty perspective.
I mean, I don't want you to say anything that is gonna,
No, don't worry. Like, Kuwait is currently in a bit of a weird situation because, you know, Kuwait's emir is 89 years old.
Okay.
So
and that is, sorry, just to interject, but these are some of the troubling things with these type of places when someone who's been in power from a different age, you know, and they still rule with that type of thumb. But that, I was trying to preface it with that.
But no, like just the political situation of the Gulf right now. So all 6 countries there: Saudi, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and the UAE. You know, like they're part of this union, and since June 2017, there's you know, Bahrain, Saudi, and the Emirates have blockaded Qatar.
Right.
So none of those countries maintain diplomatic relations with each other, with Qatar anymore. And Kuwait has basically, it's been thrust into the middle and hasn't picked a side.
Right.
So Kuwait's been trying to mediate the blockade since 2017.
Wow.
And obviously it hasn't gone anywhere. The blockade is still firmly in place. Kuwait still maintains relations with Qatar and everyone else. So the emir of Kuwait basically has he's the world's, what was it? I think he's the world's longest serving Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs for 40 years.
What?
Foreign affairs have changed somewhat.
They have. So, you know, he's very well respected sort of as being this diplomat and this fatherly figure, you know, within the Gulf. So he's trying to build that, you know, like try to bridge that gap and make peace there again. And then, you know, the Kuwaiti government dynamic. Kuwait has they have a national assembly and a parliament.
Right.
And that parliament is very active, and they get involved in all sorts of issues. So there's a lot of like political standoffs and issues that, you know, keep bubbling to the surface there. So it's a very dynamic, let's say, political scene.
And what would you say is the view of the rest of the sort of Arab world from within Kuwait? I mean, are they quite sort of, you know, there must be a difference between Kuwait perception of the rest of the Arab world is the difference between us, like how we perceive it. You know, does it feel like it's part of that whole world, or does it feel like it's sort of on a different level almost, you know, a different tier of sort of...
Oof, I'll try to answer this as best as I can. So you may have to like guide me in, you know, down the right road. But, you know, within the Arab world, because obviously you've got Kuwait, let's say, on one end, and then Morocco on the other. Yeah. So each little patch of the Arab world is just so different. So so the Gulf, for example, is very different than North Africa and Egypt.
And I think there's, just to briefly interrupt, a tendency in the West to see the Middle East and the Arab world as basically a monolith, and of course that's not true.
No. Like the whole place is all just one big blurry mess that's all the same. You know, there's like definite sort of differences that you can sort of, you know, it's malleable stuff that you can see and hear. But in the UK and I think the US a lot as well, it seems a no-go zone in terms of going there physically or just even thinking about it. Or
like attempting to understand anything about it as well.
I mean, listen, like there's a lot of bad press, and, you know, ultimately when you see areas of turmoil, you know, your natural reaction is just to, you know, especially the Middle East is a pretty small area. So when one country is going through, you know, some trouble, all of a sudden you just sort of lump all of that into one category and you're like, all right, don't need to go see that. So.
Yeah.
But it is, it's definitely something that's interesting to see where it's going to go as a whole. You know, like what's going to be their. Did they have a plan for where they want to be as a whole in the sort of the next 50 years, or is it they just figuring themselves out essentially? Because, like you say, there's this generation of young people that are sort of been opened in their eyes, sort of like not opened, but they've experienced different parts of the world that is very different from itself, and to see that it's going to have an effect on a generation, like you're saying, you know. And do you think where do you think? I think what I'm getting at is like, where do you think Kuwait is going to be in the next sort of, and the Middle East as a whole? Where do you see it going in the next sort of 30 to 40 years?
Excellent question. How much time you got?
About another hour.
Sweet.
Right.
I can get us more wine if we need.
But basically, like speaking of Kuwait and like a lot of these Gulf countries, a lot of them basically have sort of these grandiose visions 2030, 2035, whatever you want to call them. Kuwait's version is Vision 2035.
Okay.
So it's this grand, you know, nebulous vision that's shaped basically like these-
Nebulous.
Word of the day.
Word of the week, actually, because
Yeah.
that's what Theresa May got called by the guy in Brussels?
Yeah, they
Said she was
yeah.
nebulous.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
It resulted in a lot of people Googling the word nebulous, I assume. But yeah, anyway.
Ooh,
Nebulous. Bing, bing, bing.
Or nebulae.
Oh.
But basically, like it's all these big buzzwords. So
Yeah.
you know, they want to be a knowledge economy capital and finance this and woohoo that. You know, hospital beds, great. You know, all these big, you know, goals that just sound really good. So they're trying to sort of like trudge towards this very vague, ambiguous,
Yeah.
you know, large number attached future. And the issue is, for a place, let's say, I'm going to compare Kuwait and Qatar very briefly. So Kuwait, for example, has because they sort of became independent first in the Gulf in 1961. So they come from a lot of money, and in many ways they were sort of the pioneers in the rest of the Gulf. So they had a lot of development and stuff going for them. And then obviously with the 80s and the invasion in 1990, that sort of put, you know, the brakes on as far as things go. So Kuwait's sort of languishing and has now like this weird vision that it's trying to work towards. Qatar, on the other hand, independent since 1971, and they have the World Cup coming in 2022 there. So when you compare Kuwait and Qatar, and I'm working in Doha right now, so you know, firsthand experience between the two, and in Doha you can actually see very tangible changes being made, like infrastructure, development, education, people coming in and out, and there's like this very, you know, exciting energy, sort of as the country tries to open itself up, and especially in light of the blockade, all of a sudden now there's this incredible drive to sort of assert, you know, their sovereignty and their place in the world. And now they sort of feel like they have no choice but to grow and connect themselves to the world, because that's the only way that they can survive, especially in a region as tumultuous as the Gulf. So Kuwait, for example, is like languishing and sort of lumbering along. Right. And then you have a place like Doha, which is, you know, trying to reach for the stars and throw money at everything to make something happen.
Yeah. I've never heard it put like that. It's something that I've not.
Sort of like some slightly similar life forms at different stages in their evolution or something like that.
But then there's that, was it the rising water brings all the boats up? That's one of the terms that I've heard about those type of things. Like if you
all boats rise together or something.
Yeah. Like rising water brings all the boats up or something like that together. Yeah, something. I'm paraphrasing. As I tend to do with my
together,
whole life.
Rising.
Water, boats, rising together. I sound like a slam poet.
You do, kind of. You
Boats,
just need to say it in a more obnoxious
together.
way. Yeah.
Quality.
Rising.
Quality Street.
That could be your slam poet name.
Well,
Quality Street.
that's
And
brilliant.
if that's nobody's real slam poetry name, someone should take it.
Is that even a thing anymore?
Slam poetry?
Oh, feminists, they probably do that.
I still get
You still
email
do?
notifications from the Toronto Slam Poetry, whatever they're called. Yes.
Did you go?
I did go when I was in high school. Yeah. Because we had a band, I will say, of slam poets come to my creative writing class when I was in grade 11 or 12.
A group or a band?
Well, because they did like spoken word, but they did music as well. They're actually a really good band. And so
one
we
of the most pretentious
started...
forms of art is spoken word.
Oh, definitely. But it's A, really interesting, and B, a way of getting your parents to let you go to bars when you're like 17.
Oh,
so,
fair.
uh-huh.
But did you drink?
No,
Okay.
underage exes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got to be a judge on one of them once.
Oh yeah, I think you
And
told me this.
people would like send you drinks. They have to say what your favorite drink was, and I was like, I don't know.
Like the only thing you'd saw at that point was James Bond. You're like,
yeah, it's like a
Shaken,
shaken,
not
not
stirred.
stirred.
yes, money penny.
Will the root beer float, please? But yeah,
Yeah.
it was cool.
It's
Yeah.
it is terrible. Like I had a friend who did a spoken word type band thing, and it was actually it was a band, and he didn't sing. He did like spoken word over the top.
Okay.
So it was kind of like epic sort of indie rock type stuff, but it was sort of like very like long and like
Okay.
you know, just like it was really quite good. The music was awesome, but the if he's listening, the spoken word aspect of it was
No,
just
because I
it
think
worked, but
Yeah.
what it was just terrible.
because I think they were like because Patti Smith, for instance, does a lot of spoken word stuff, but there's a place for that, and she also sings, and she's brilliant and a
Yeah.
genius, and I love her. And genuinely, this band, the spoken word guys, because they did also sing as well, and I would still happily listen
Yeah.
to them. They're still
Do you know who
Still
else
good.
does a lot of spoken word? Natalie Portman. Like I think all of her stuff is pretty much
she pretty
spoken
much
word.
just talks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
It's like kind of like-
wondrous.
Her job is to talk and make faces, basically. Weird.
Sorry, I'm getting distracted. We currently have a naked showerer.
Is there a naked neighbor there?
So we have a neighbor who just does not quit when it comes to showering naked. Not well, obviously you'll shower
really?
naked.
We do recommend that everyone shower naked.
Don't do it.
Unless you're a never nude.
But
I guess.
their bathroom faces our window, which
Yeah.
is the living room window
Ah.
or the studio window,
Yeah.
just to keep up the magic.
And they have like a full length window almost. Like you can see kind of knees
Yeah.
up, basically.
Well, they're standing in a bath, I think.
oh, I guess
it's
that's
one of those
why.
type
I was
ones.
confused
So
about
there's
that.
no enclosed off bit, so the bath is
Mhm.
right beside the window.
Yeah.
So when they're standing there, you can see everything.
Yeah. And I hope they know.
Or
Like,
listening.
maybe they want
listening.
to.
Maybe they're
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
Well, because if they don't mind, I don't mind. I just hope that they realize. I've been considering making a sign being like, it's okay, but just so you know, everyone can see you.
Yeah, because when we were getting our windows fitted, we had our windows fitted this
We did. We
just
moved
for you,
up.
Cal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh wow! Thank
In
you.
anticipation of you
Yeah.
arriving, we were like, we have to change these bloody windows. Like Cal-El will not put
Tolerate.
up with single glazing
No.
bloody windows.
Single glazing.
It
What
was
is this?
very Dickensian.
You don't even have windows in Kuwait. You're just like, it's so warm that you just have screens.
Not when it's 60 degrees out there.
Oh yeah, because then you would have to have windows just to keep
They-
it cool.
keep it
And they get
Yeah.
sandstorms. You get sandstorms,
vicious
right?
sandstorms. Kuwait is actually the world's hottest inhabited city.
Really?
Yep. I think like a spot in northern Kuwait broke like the world record for like hottest
Oh God.
spots.
And how hot was it?
I think it was like 63 degrees.
No.
Yeah, no, like-
Stop the world. I want off.
Yeah, like or 59. Just something
Yeah.
just halfway
That's
over boiling.
disgusting.
Yeah, it's vicious.
Oh my God. No, thank you.
Shall we top up and continue
Yeah,
our
I can get,
conversation?
okay. So our options are we have a few tiny bits of white wine, or we could open a red wine.
Red. Let's go with the red.
Yeah.
You're the host. I like the magic claps.
Yeah, but they won't hear this when I've edited.
Yeah, so just how
So
mental.
you're,
It's awesome.
you're just gonna be like, I hear claps at night, mostly.
They mostly come at night.
They mostly clap at night.
Mostly.
Yes, we're quoting Aliens. Have you seen Aliens?
No.
There's a wee girl.
So what would be your exposure to sort of movies when you were younger?
A lot of Disney.
Right. Okay. Really?
Yeah, a lot of Disney. There's a surprising amount of stuff that I have not seen. So
It's pretty much like Laura. She has a weird tendency to not see really good like movies that everyone's seen because she's so much of a contrarian.
I'm a second generation contrarian as well.
there you go. Firmly embedded.
Yep.
That's why she's over here.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much.
So yeah, like I'll
Think you immigrate to North America? I'll show you.
I'll go back to where
Yeah.
you came from.
5 generations for nothing.
So Disney, a lot of Disney movies. Is
Yeah.
that not like the sort of the symbol of the West? Is Disney?
The pinnacle of
Yeah.
North American capitalism.
Yeah, no, just relatively innocuous,
Oh.
seemingly harmless
Okay.
stuff that you can just, fill your kids with. Just,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
great. You want to ask questions about coitus? Great. Here's the Little Mermaid. Go away.
Don't worry about that. Yeah.
One of the best things I've seen is a fan theory that Aladdin takes place in a dystopian future.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Is that why he doesn't have any nipples?
because there's a lot.
Good point.
Who doesn't have any nipples?
Aladdin.
Yeah.
Because he wears a vest, but he doesn't have any nipples.
But it's over his nipples.
But he like flaps around. He's like hopping about.
It doesn't
Yeah.
flap around. They didn't have the
they're on
technology
his
to make
back.
things flap around back then.
I think he did a share and they're on his back.
But have you seen they're making like a live action
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Aladdin?
Oh, because they're doing the Lion King.
The
one
Lion
as
King.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, all
But
the-
that's animated though.
They've
It's not
run out of
real
ideas.
lions.
No.
no.
What?
That's just
I quit.
it's just Animal Planet is the Lion King. But yeah, they have Will Smith as the genie.
Yep.
I'm not sure who's playing Aladdin actually.
I forget who. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like
He's Middle Eastern, right?
he is.
Yeah.
He's
Oh, yeah.
Coptic Egyptian. I think.
Okay.
if I'm
So I
not
remember there is a
mistaken.
lot of anxiety around
Disney.
trying to
And-
cast white
yeah.
people basically as everything. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think Jasmine they cast a, like, if I'm not mistaken, a British actress of Gujarati Indian descent.
Okay.
So, like, all of a sudden, all the people in the Arab world got their panties in a wad because they're just like, wait a minute, there's plenty of beautiful, Arab women.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So-
a weird. It's a whole weird vibe with the guy because I was reading one recently and it was about Crazy Rich Asians and someone was mad that the guy in it is half Asian.
Okay.
And it was like, could you so who's he allowed to play then? Because he's not
Wait a minute,
allowed theoretically to play white people or Asian people.
There's no
so-
half Asian people in the world.
Exactly.
Is that what you're telling
Yeah,
me?
they were like super mad about it.
There's no quarter Asian people.
Turns out there are people with varying degrees of everything.
There's
yeah.
no
I'm one of
Asian
those.
people. Is that what you're going to tell me next?
Were you stuck? Were you- it's just getting lower and lower, the proportion. And I totally, absolutely do get wanting to not cast white people and everything. I think that's brilliant. But it's when it starts getting
But
like...
that shouldn't be the thing from the outset to do. Like, it shouldn't be we're going to make a movie because we want it not to have all white people in it. That's when it becomes obvious. Like the thing they did with the Ghostbusters, and they were going to do the all female version.
Yeah.
And it was like the story and the movie was superseded by just the fact that they wanted to make a movie with just women as
Yeah.
the main characters.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
and that shows when you start to see those type of things coming up. It has to be natural for that to be, just to be good, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, it has to be naturally just all women in it. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
just the main reason they made the movie.
It's just to put a bunch of women on
Yeah.
screen. All right.
Yeah. I think there's we're in a really weird place right now because on the one hand, people are still afraid to cast. Okay, I'll pour you one and then I'll finish my thought. You pest. I'm off duty.
She's actually supposed to be working right now, so
I'm not.
Duncan, if you're listening, she was not violently ill.
It is in fact the opposite that's true, and I've been covering for coworkers who were violently ill. So I worked for
Violently ill.
11 hours yesterday that I
Someone-
wasn't scheduled to work.
Someone
Thank you,
supposedly,
Laura, Mother Teresa. Hope.
someone supposedly got food poisoning from eating McDonald's.
Because that never happens.
So I was like, if you're just hungover, you're in so much trouble.
If it was McDonald's, then there'd be a bunch of people that were also,
Well, that was sort of my thinking.
yeah.
I
Like,
mean-
there'd be 1 million people in Edinburgh that were sick that day.
But, yeah. But at the
Touche.
same time, if they, regardless of how they got that way, we're going to be that useless. They don't want them at work anyway. So,
Cheers.
So cheers to the health of Matthew and Hugh, who are hopefully feeling much better.
Mazel tov.
That's right.
Mazel.
L'chaim.
What are you saying in Kuwait?
Saha.
Well, you probably wouldn't drink though, would you?
No. But,
Okay.
but you would say saha, which
Okay.
which means health.
Okay.
Cool.
So
Health. Good health.
Woohoo.
So- It's wine.
fruity.
Yeah.
mhm.
You sound like that peanut butter guy, you know that. Have you seen this guy? He's like a
I've
peanut
not.
butter tester.
It gives me absolute nightmares.
It's this
Yeah,
old
give me
guy.
Hannibal Lecter before him any day.
It's this old scientist guy, and he's like, he tastes for how good the peanut butter is before they can allow it, and he's like
You've
this.
gotta
and he-
aerate
yeah,
the
and he's like, you gotta
buttery
get the back
bits,
bit. He's
yep.
like,
It's so gross.
up the sweet, and then he does it like really fast.
It's super
Oh.
disgusting.
And it's like
yeah.
so
And it
weird.
zooms in on his mouth, and he's like
He's
a
like,
little rodent.
"Bah."
Yeah.
Yuck. All right. Thanks for that.
I have a problem where I congenitally swirl all my drinks now to aerate them. So
In her mouth as well.
I try and avoid doing that because it's gross.
And
Not
you were
helpful.
mentioning like, is Kuwait like not allowed alcohol, or is it just generally sort of not allowed?
Oh no, it's Kuwait is a dry country.
Okay.
So no alcohol in duty free hotels.
It literally is as well.
Yeah, like just
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
hey.
they're really leaning into it.
Try in all formats.
Bada boom.
But yeah, like
Mm.
I guess what was your first experiences with alcohol, and was it something that before you did it, did you have any apprehension about because of?
Oh,
weight?
100%.
Really?
Yeah. No. My parents were really good at sort of striking the whole fear of God thing in me.
Oh, nice.
Thou
Yeah.
shalt not drink kind of thing. Yeah. So I was raised loosely Muslim,
Mm.
but like one of those things growing up in a household with overprotective parents.
Mm-hmm.
They just basically, for me, anyone who drank alcohol automatically was an alcoholic.
Right.
Mm.
And those were two very scary things. So if you drank alcohol, surely you went home and you beat your wife, because that's just what happens. So I was terrified, with it. But when I moved to Toronto, I found myself in a situation, September 25th, 2006. And
Is that when you lost your sober virginity?
I did, in grand style, no less. 13 shots and 2 beers later.
Oh Lord, that would knock
How are
me
you
out.
even?
Nope.
How are you even standing?
I survived. I experienced my first hangover at age 25.
No.
Wow. To be
way.
fair, I did too, but it wasn't for lack of trying.
This is true. Yeah.
So how did it all happen? Like you went from being pretty much teetotal, I guess. Had you seen any alcohol in Kuwait before? Like, had you seen bottles and stuff?
Well, Kuwait has a thriving black market.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of selection and stuff that's
Slavery,
made in BAFTA.
you mean?
Sorry?
Slavery?
No. Well, that's a
Making
different
a very-
different story, but
No, just you said thriving black market.
no. Well, hey,
I'm being
Oh
racist.
boy.
I am joking.
we're going off the air now, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't think we're not on there.
Difficulties.
I'm making light of
Of what?
it's my quick quit.
Yeah, cool clip.
Cool quit. So yeah,
Anyway,
continue. So you
black
went
market.
from Kuwait, and you were saying that I was asking you if you had seen alcohol before at this
Yeah.
point.
I mean, listen, I grew up all over the world, so obviously I know what it looks like. I know, I've had some familiarity with different types of it, but just up until I was 18, I'd never ingested it before. So, I think that was my turning point. And, I'm at a point right now, like, where pretty much my whole family knows that I drink. And it's just, it's one of those things where the ones who know and are cool with it, live and let live, and everyone else, you just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just don't address the elephant in the room.
The
Word.
Cal elephant in the room.
Cal
Hey.
elephant. Oh my god, that's funny.
Calephant.
Oh. I'm just imagining like a really cute cartoon character now. The Cal elephant.
And yeah, so you were in Toronto when you first had a drink. And what was your first drink?
Vodka shots.
You went completely.
You had 13
went for it.
shots of vodka. That
Yep.
would still kill me. Like,
Yeah, no.
I put a lot of practice.
Your
and that would
friends probably like had
definitely kill
water
me.
in a vodka bottle, and they were probably like, "This is filled with vodka." And you're like, "You."
Oh man, yeah.
Oh my God.
The corner of Bloor and St. George will never be the same. But
Ah.
Wordsworth College, woo!
I have a story from my old band days, going on tour, and I was playing Liverpool, and we had a break in between Lincoln, I think, and then we had a day off. Then we were playing in Liverpool the next day. So we drove straight to Liverpool. So we were like, what are we going to do? We can only stay in the van. We need somewhere to stay, till tomorrow. So the vocalist of the band and I went down the main street in Liverpool. I'm not sure where it was. Saw this girl outside this bar. We were like, went up to her and like, we're a band on tour. We're from Scotland. We need somewhere to stay for the night. And she was like, I stay in halls. I have like 3 extra bedrooms. Like my friends are either not here yet or they're on holiday.
So this, for international listeners, is the halls of residence at a university.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not as official as it sounds. It's just like a organized child piss up.
Yeah, basically, it's like apartments, but with a lot of fire doors and sharing of
Yeah.
things,
Okay,
and wet rooms instead of showers. Always annoying.
Yeah, a communal kitchen, which is terrible.
Yeah.
always a
God.
bad idea.
I
Flashbacks.
communally hate the idea of that. So yeah, went back to her place. She's like she's the only person that's staying in halls. Like it must have been like 8 rooms or whatever, but she was the only person staying over that night.
Have you just thought better of telling the story in the middle of the story? I just saw a little
There's-
micro
There's
expression.
a lot more
part-
gaps now.
There's a part of it, yeah, but basically, like, we were all standing there and we were all joking around as young lads, like one of us is going to have to bang her because, like, just out of courtesy, you know, because we're like, she gave us a room to stay
Courtesy
stay
Oh my god, that's so
stay
funny.
for the night, but we were joking around, and supposedly she was like right beside the door when we were all joking about this.
And then you no longer have somewhere to stay that night.
No, we did, but we ended up drinking all of our vodka as a band, and she went to go and get some bacon to make us bacon sandwiches the next morning. And
What a sweetheart.
we drank all her vodka from this, and when she arrived back, we filled it up with water, and then she started having a drink from it. And she's like, "Boy, this is like really strong," and I was like, we were all like
It's not.
sniggering around
Oh
each
my
other.
God.
It's just like thinking, like, it gives power to like the placebo, and you know, like the power of persuasion.
Yeah.
You know, if you think something is something, then your mind's gonna take over and
Yeah,
tell you
you're
that.
just like in the vibe.
And she
yeah.
genuinely thought it tasted like strong alcohol.
When it was just water.
It was just water.
That's funny.
That's
And then in
nice.
the morning, she was hungover, I guess.
She's
maybe.
terribly hungover for having had a liter of water or whatever.
She made us all bacon sandwiches, and
Aw.
and no one had sex with her out of courtesy.
Alas.
That is funny. And she got out all of her dating of musicians all in one go, hopefully, and was safe for the rest of her life from you people.
Thank you.
It was a good experience. So yeah, that's my my power of persuasion story.
story?
Yeah, vodka
Yeah.
story. It was good. It was really good.
Nice.
So yeah, how long were you in Toronto for?
1 year.
1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
we've all lived in Toronto.
Yeah, we have.
Toronto
Wait, you
Club.
lived in Toronto too?
Yeah,
No
I
way.
stayed there
Oh
for
my
a
god, I
year.
didn't know
No, I
that.
did
Yeah.
What year did you stay there?
2006 to 7.
Ah, old school.
And that was my last year of high school. So
Yep.
we were in
Oh.
Toronto at the same time.
That's right.
Yep.
And
Cool.
I stayed there in 2013 to 2014.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
And we stayed on the same street.
Yep.
No
I didn't
way.
live in it nearly, but it's like St. Clair, so it's long as
Yeah.
heck,
Like
but
St. Clair's
yeah.
like as long
Yeah.
as as Toronto is wide, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've never
Ah.
even been to his St. Clair, so well, I have now once because
Yeah.
you're like, oh my god, this is it. So just by coincidence.
Yeah, we accidentally drove through it when
Yeah.
we were over in Toronto, like just past my old, like where I used to get the
Yeah.
tram to get the bus to my work when I was living there, because I was working over there. Why were you there anyway? Were you just like schooling?
I went for university, but I applied to study architecture. It didn't work out. My parents thought that moving to Kuwait was better for me. And,
Okay.
10 years later, still not
Yeah.
working. But
What
also-
was your experiences of Toronto? Did you enjoy it?
I was 18 and fresh out of the house. So, sheltered child, all
Yeah.
alone in the world for the first time. So it was very fat and lazy. A lot of pizza and beer.
You probably would have enjoyed anything that wasn't Kuwait, or where you were.
Well,
at
I was
that
in
point.
Egypt,
Yeah, Egypt.
so,
Really?
yeah,
Did
yeah.
you stay in Egypt as well?
I graduated from high school there.
Wow.
So 2 years in Egypt.
Holy shit, man. You've
Yeah.
got all these little things that, you've just got such a weird perspective on the world because you've been to all these places that people just don't have a clue about over here. What's people's reactions when you tell them that you've graduated from high school in Egypt?
Mostly just a lot of, curiosity and, whoa, what were you doing there? That's so
Yeah.
cool. Tell me about this. And then, just open up
And then
various
sometimes you
rabbit
end up on a podcast.
And-
So
Right.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
High school, it was August 2004 to June 2006.
So I assume, I don't know if you've been back since, but I assume Egypt is wildly different from then to now.
Yeah. So I graduated high school in 2006, went back there in 2008, then again in 13 after the Arab Spring, and I just spent 2 weeks in Egypt this year.
Right.
Oh.
So in April and then in end of September into October, and it is wildly different. Just by all the geopolitics, the Arab Spring, and just a lot of things going on. So the spirit of Egypt is definitely shattered,
Wow.
and it's not the same country anymore. There's
Yeah.
a lot more desperation, a lot more hardship there.
Huh.
So yeah, and the numbers there don't add up. It's a country of about 100 million people,
And for someone, for a country that relies heavily
On
on tourism,
Mm.
to then have so much turmoil that's going on from religion and politics is sort of, it feels like they're kind of stuck. You know, if that tourism goes away and all these sort of ideas of what Egypt is shattered, then that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
You know, will there be an Egypt eventually?
Well, I mean, Egypt right now, you know, like the tourism took a massive hit after the Arab Spring and obviously after the downing of that Russian jet in the Sinai.
Oh yeah.
And even though right now the tourist numbers are up and they're coming like slowly trickling back, but you know, just the country is as a whole, there's a lot of efforts and things that are disjointed. And right now, Egypt's biggest problem sort of is just its own economy.
Yeah.
You know, huge population, a lot of, you know, prices are going up, taxes are up, et cetera, et cetera. So just when the nationals are not happy and there's a lot of stress there, suddenly that tourist market, which you entirely depend on, is compromised just by the shakiness of the national environment.
Yeah.
So,
because there was a lot of hope after the sort of rebellion that happened. Like a lot of people, and me included, thought it was going to be promising for Egypt, and it just seems it sort of went in decline after all that stuff happened. And it was due to the internet. I mean, that was widely publicized, was the fact that Twitter helped all these people sort of organize and were able to circumvent the government by just being able to talk online. And it was great. It was a great tool, and it was great to see those things happening. But then it just, I don't know where it went wrong. Like, where do you think it just sort of turned the corner?
I mean, I'm not as well versed sort of in the idiosyncrasies of Egyptian politics as I should be, but you know, basically
it was all the sun god's fault, I guess, probably.
hey, but just
I'm joking.
But based on a few conversations that I've had with some Egyptian friends of mine, basically Egypt was like under Mubarak. It was obviously, you know, Mubarak sort of was the head honcho, and you know, corruption, whatever it was that existed on that uppermost level, the country functioned. So even though there was sort of like a dysfunction to Egypt, you know, just that lawlessness of it was playful and people just enjoyed it and everything just worked. So when the Arab Spring happened and they toppled Mubarak, and then the Muslim Brotherhood came in under Mohammed Morsi, you know, that just, it sort of became that battle that I talked about with the Gulf, like bringing back cultural values and then people just fighting against that and just all these sort of different ideals coming to a head over where Egypt should be, what it really is, etc. So that happened, and just it's, you know, Morsi was ousted in I forgot what year, 13. Yeah, maybe. But and now under what's his face, Abdel Fattah Sisi, he's, you know, Sisi's made his bed with Saudi Arabia, and there's just a lot of like geopolitics and stuff that are just at work right now, and Egypt is just again caught in the middle trying to make it work while still playing into that regional playing field.
It's hard. I mean, there's obviously been studies to say that when there's places in the Middle East that have traditionally had these dictator types, when you take them out with any other backup plan, then that can create a vacuum, which is terrible for the rest of the country, because that allows people to come in, and then civil war can happen as well. Yeah. And it allows all these sort of tribes to fight over what it is to be whatever country they're from. So essentially that's probably, it was the same in Egypt, you know, when you take this guy out, then it's sort of like there's no backup plan, there was no infrastructure in place to sort of say this is the direction that Egypt's going to go down now. You know, it's just like whoever came,
vacuum.
It's just whoever came to the top was the person that was going to be the one that dictating it. Yeah.
Well, also, you know, Mubarak kind of was there for what was it, 30 years? Yeah. So, you know, that's a long time. So just to develop that sort of complacency and, you know, just a way of life. 30 years is a long time. And, you know, a lot of things just sort of get set in stone and it becomes a way of life. Yeah. So all of a sudden, when that familiarity is completely eradicated, you know, you open up sort of that box of total to the unknown. And that's, you know, that's just gone in so many different directions right now.
Yeah.
It's tough to sort of comprehend that, though, because it's funny just being from Scotland and talking about these things that I have no experience with. Like, you know, you see it on the internet or on TV, and it's still hard to put yourself in a position as someone who's from a place that traditionally has grown up with one person for 30 years in power. You know, that's so alien to me.
I guess maybe in terms of in our lifetimes in the UK, we're as close to that now as we'll ever get. Not in terms of somebody being in power for a long time, but in terms of facing something that's close to a vacuum, like something where all the rules that we think make up the reality of the way the country is run and governed suddenly are all looking like there's no man behind the curtain. Like they only work if we, believe in them, or if our politicians choose to deign to do them. And it's suddenly like, it is easy to see how things could get really weird, basically.
Well, civilization and government is of thin veneer that people constantly tell themselves is something that's real and malleable, but it's so easy sort of disrupt that.
Yeah.
And to be able to show that it's just, we're barely hanging on as a civilization. Even the West, like countries like us in America, who you think typically is a stereotypical sort of Western country and sort of modern and sort of politically sort of equal and well balanced, but it's all just hanging on a thread at any given moment, and can be pushed in any direction from anything that happens in the world.
And these are things that in all our best efforts have gone into making them sort of just and fair and democratic compared to the old days, at least relative to the West, where it was a roll of the dice if you were going to get someone's cretin son, looking after things or not.
I got someone's cretin daughter.
Oh, cheers. Well, my parents will be here in a week. You can talk about it with them. But the fact that it just takes us doing our thing, the thing that we're supposed to be doing in terms of democracy or whatever, and you end up with, say in the States, somebody like Trump, who it quickly becomes clear if you don't know how to be president or what you're supposed to do, then that office doesn't have the sort of reality that we all thought it did. Like if you just don't do the things, it doesn't work that way. So.
And my hope, and it's sometimes dashed by seeing people who have completely opposite of views from you in life. Like one of the things that came up recently is you just assume certain things in life are subjectively good, like objectively sorry, like objectively good and right and is what everyone believes in. But then you find characters in the world, and there's always going to be one, but you find the whole sectors that don't believe in that type of thing, and it's sort of hard to think that as a world nation is how we should be acting, and it seems sort of whimsical and sort of like a utopian idea, which is a terrible word for a lot of people, but it's not. It's just trying to, if we all come together, and it sounds so fucking like hippie-ish, but how are we going to transcend religion, geography, politics to then become sort of a world nation when there's all those factors in the way still? Like the UK wants to leave the EU. Like the EU is not perfect. It is totally not perfect, but it's one of the bigger steps to becoming a global economy and something that works together. It's one of the steps. And to share
responsibility, which is...
If you can't even think in those terms, which Britain can, or England can't, it can't think of itself as not being just the Great Britain, stiff upper lip, fucking, pies and apples and pears and fucking let's go down the Strand and, Cockney whatever.
God save
Can
the
I
Queen,
get a needle point of all of that whole thing? That was great. I loved that.
But those things, I've said this before multiple times, but patriotism, nationalism is the death knell for a global civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, if I may just chime in on that, like, this is coming from, someone like me who's traveled all over the place and whatnot, and especially what I see is today's world, is even smaller than it ever was. You can get on a plane right now and just, in 18 hours, you can find yourself on the other side of the planet. So there's so much more connectivity.
Yeah.
Information is instantly accessible. You could, in the comfort of your own living room, you could be reading about all sorts of stuff that is, that would never have existed 5, 10, 50 years ago. So there is sort of no excuse, like, towards this, uniform world, and just all these borders coming together. But I think that because so much information is evolving, and becoming accessible so quickly, that all of a sudden it is, when you upset something so rapidly, that creates trouble spots. And right now, like, that's one of the, like, I think personally, one of the things that I think it's doing is making people afraid. And obviously with fear, you have these knee-jerk reactions, and all of a sudden your sovereignty and your borders and what is familiar to you becomes all the more important.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that's why we've seen sort of relatively nationalistic turns in countries recently. Is it's like a
The US,
sort of like a death rattle
namely,
almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even countries like Poland and Italy now as well. Like it's like
Hungary.
or like Hungary,
It's funny-
Austria had swung super democratic and then swung back the way around.
It's funny how Poland's sort of hard right coinciding with their sort of growth in capitalism. Like Poland has become like a huge economy now, and that has also coincided with sort of being right. There's a lot of right wing sort of side of their politics over there.
Yeah.
Just to sort of
it is weird.
Yeah.
It is a weird one. And
but
whether
globalization, people are afraid of globalization. Like it kind of alludes to what you were saying slightly. People are afraid when they're smashed together so quickly through the internet. Like we're still living in the fallout from the internet. We're so connected that we still don't understand how to deal with being so accessible to someone that's in a different completely world view from you.
Yeah, and we can't even handle the parts of that way that we even have control over. Like we can't even figure out how much time to spend on our phones. So let alone when that's just the one party version of that, when you get into actually communicating with people, like it's just a bit of a mind blower.
And for me, I think people romanticize and put too much emphasis on culture. Like culture is something, just because something's a couple of thousand, at the most couple of thousand years old, maybe 1,000 years old, as a people, those are things that are made to sort of reinforce sort of us and them. When you put those things, like take the what am I trying to get at? But you know what I'm saying. Like I think culture is not permanent; it's malleable. It's something that changes, and people think just because it's something that they've practiced maybe for 100 years or 200 years that it gives them the right to act a certain way to anyone else.
Yeah. And that is when I have a problem with it, is you have every right to any culture you've acquired. Brilliant. When your culture starts to tell you that the way you behave is more important than the way somebody else behaves, unto you being able to make decisions about what they're allowed to do, that's when it's a problem.
Or even like historically, a certain culture maybe have been ostracized. Native Americans is one of the examples, and then they start to start to go inward and sort of become insular because of the experiences they've had, and you're not to question that. Same with like sort of the black culture in America. It's gotten to the point where they're going inwards. You can't even say anything in regards to their culture because they were becoming so inward and insular. You think a culture that has been so ostracized and it would be so welcome to become part of the civilization, but now it's a control thing. Like they don't, and I'm generalizing, there's a certain part of that culture, that is becoming sort of separate and trying to stop any interaction. Like you saying words that are predominantly used in a black culture, like that is a big issue, but a word is a word, and it's when you take control of I wouldn't say it, it's just not part of my sort of vernacular or whatever, but at the same time, these are things used to sort of separate and control.
It's weird because I think on the one hand, I wish people would be more accepting of culture as being dynamic as opposed to something that's static and can be preserved. On the other hand, with situations like you're talking about, I think I can wish something wasn't that way and at the same time not think I have a right to say that it's a bad thing. But at the same time as well, it's very complicated. It's also like, does my need to say a word supersede the level to which somebody else is bothered by it? Like
most people wouldn't say it. But there shouldn't be this sort of like taking, like a quote unquote taking back the words. It's like
and it's weird around language as well, because there's always this like, if you can't say it, you can't see it thing. And language has been used to control people for a very, very long time, and it's obviously still happening.
And we're very tribalistic. This is something we have to recognize and try and get past our biology in that way. And how do you even do that? Like, how do you supersede your biology?
That's a weird, because I think when you look at something as sort of a wave or something like that, then it seems very difficult. But if you think of how you behave in your day-to-day life, I think most people are in control of themselves enough to be as good a person as they want to be as well. It's a weird thing.
And I'm completely simplifying like the problems into sort of simple terms. Obviously, you know, there's many factors that go into different cultures being shunned and sort of ostracized from different places.
Yeah,
It's
is
not as simple as
complicated.
just being, we'll all be inclusive. You know?
Yeah, because we're not starting at zero.
No.
Now is a big complicated part of it. And the other thing, I guess, on the flip side of that is I think anything that shuts down communication or discourages communication is a bad thing.
Totally.
But if history, you know, if you've gotten slapped in the face a bunch of times, you're going to want to avoid getting slapped in the face again. And I can see as well that certain, you know, communities and cultures feel they need to take steps to protect themselves because it's the sort of like fool me twice thing. It's
Go
what
on.
history.
Go on. Is that famous quote
Fool
by
me
George
twice.
Bush? Fool me once. Shame on you.
Fool me twice.
You can't get me again.
Yeah.
It's a great George Bush line.
I ought to, like, if you told me that was Michael Scott from The Office, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. It's very complicated. And I think there are also a lot of things about globalism that we should be skeptical about, but it's not the stuff we want to be skeptical about. It's things like monocultures and how vulnerable certain like economic practices make us. And that seems to be the stuff people are really happy to ignore. And they're much happier to focus on kind of multiculturalism and being freaked out by that for some reason, when I don't think that's what people should be worried about at all.
Is there different sort of parts to Kuwait in terms of culture as well? I mean, it does happen to every place. You know, like Scotland, you can go 15 miles and they'll have completely different accents. Is there sort of definitive parts of Kuwait that's different?
Well, you know, basically Kuwait is a city-state, so tiny little area. I think, you know, the whole country is smaller than the greater Paris area. So, you know, within that sort of you know, I think just within Kuwaitis, you know, there's, you know, what they call Hadar, which pretty much means modernized, and the Bedouins. So there are very clear Bedouin accents, for example. And then, you know, Kuwaitis of Iranian descent. Some of them will have, you know, more pronounced Iranian accents. So, you know, just within that small population of 1 million people, you sort of have these diverse, you know, little, you know, ends of it. But the bigger sort of diversity is sort of between the Kuwaitis and the expats. So,
Right.
And of course, Kuwait's a country of about 4.4 million people. And again, 1 million Kuwaitis, and we're outnumbered about 3 to 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what would the majority of expats in Kuwait?
The majority of them are, if I'm not mistaken, from Asia. So a lot of migrant labor, if you will. That's the term they use. And basically from the Indian subcontinent and the Philippines, predominantly in the service jobs, and the Arab world, predominantly from Egypt and the Levant area.
Right.
Okay. That is interesting.
Do you know what I read on Reddit the other week? Something like, I can't remember the specific number, but a large number, like an ungodly number of Muslims in China have been held in sort of internment camps.
Oh, yeah, like,
there is some weird,
like some strange stuff going on there.
Yeah, no, there's
and it's not really talked about because it's China, you know, they're
of course
communist country, but a loose
pretty
communist,
opaque,
but at the same time, it's not something that they're standing for. If there is just something to stand for, you know, and it's so crazy to hear that, like, just that's allowed to go on.
Yeah.
I mean, do we now remember in 1939, 1945 when we put people in camps?
Yeah, exactly.
That didn't work out too well.
You can't do that to people. You can't. It's the same. The basic argument for Brexit as well is it boils down to racism. You know.
Oh, totally.
The big one. The big one is racism, and you can't get past that. You know, I know people that talk openly about people that are coming over. You know, and it's like those are the people that are our workforce. You know.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't even be like the point of not leaving. It should be just that people are people. You know, like people are coming here to better their lives, There's rapists, there's killers all over the world. There's there's rapists and killers in the UK.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
yeah.
it's just that you have to figure out some sort of way to keep track loosely of anyone in a country, like even us, like in the same capacity that you as a citizen is kept tabs on, you know, just in that level, not in a sort of weird way where it becomes sort of slightly racist because you're profiling someone for their color.
Yeah.
It should be just the same capacity that all people are kept under sort of you know, tabs.
Yeah. And that, like, people say, like, oh, well, it's like immigrants coming over and they're going on benefits and stuff like that. It's like, do you know how, like, first of all, mostly people actually, when they talk about that, they're not talking about Europeans. They're talking about overseas people because that's who people are more racist about, essentially. And then almost none of those people will have visas where they're permitted to go on benefits. Yeah. There is no way of doing that. Like, it's not possible. You can't even really get medical treatment. Like, it's not something that there's some racket where people are doing that. It's just not. It's made up, purely made up.
And if you've risked your life enough to come across like seas and on dinghies with the fucking 50 people on this tiny little boat, then there's a reason why you've done that, because of where you've come from. If you can go through numerous countries from your own war-torn country, with the shirt
on your back,
but seeing people dying on the way, like the amount of people that die in these boats is fucking crazy.
And the fact that somebody thinks that those people would do that to get an easy ride in the UK, it's like, first of all,
I can't wait till I get there so I can get benefits,
and so I can be confronted by racists like you in my day-to-day life as well.
It comes down to, fortunately, these people can't just be homeless in the country, which would happen. You know, they have to be part of the civilization, and the first part of that is being a citizen and going on the dole. You know, that's when you can first, you know, check yourself off as part of the country or whatever, and then you can progress from there. You're not going to start in a billionaire job when you're an immigrant. This is just where you start off.
Well, it's the same as when people don't want to give homeless people change because they're going to buy you know, alcohol or whatever. It's like, well, is he going to save up and buy a flat? Like, that's going to take a while. It's a lot of quarters.
And there's cases of Scottish people being on the dole their whole fucking life. There's cases of people who are immigrants being on the dole for the rest of their life. That's just people being people.
Right.
It's not immigrants trying to come over and fucking fuck the country
advantage
up.
of the system or whatever.
Yeah, totally. And equally, if you think an immigrant is stealing your job, you should be better. Get hired before that person. Just be better.
Well, you've talked about this before. In the industry that Laura's in, there's no Scottish people.
Yeah, I've worked with a couple Scottish people and they've gotten fired because they don't turn up to work.
Fair enough.
And currently, technically, I work for one Scottish person. I don't work with any Scottish people.
No.
Yeah.
Me.
I mean, we work
together, side by side, but not in the same job.
Good
no. One time we did. It was fun.
Oh, yeah.
When you were bartending and I was bartending. It was cool.
Tendering.
Shall
we have a little bit more wine?
Jeez, I'm
know
behind
you're not doing your
okay.
job tonight. There is a kitchen through there that I might have to go in and.
Yeah, you might have to go in and stay there.
Put my head in the freezer.
That's right. Think about what you did.
Coming over here, stealing our bloody Scotsmen.
It was especially funny when I had like 3 or 4 jobs, and I was like, "Yes, I am stealing all your jobs." Actually,
was it? Talking about you being in a different place. What's the place that you've went to where you've had the biggest culture shock from?
Ooh, good question.
Biggest culture shock from what perspective?
From your perspective.
Oh man,
being Kuwaiti, quote unquote.
Funnily enough, I think the biggest culture shock, like the place that delivered the biggest shock, was Kuwait itself.
Really?
Yeah.
Good answer.
I mean, you know,
he's getting all poetic on us now.
Well.
It's the sultry sultan. He'll be here from 6 o'clock till all the way through to 9.
Should read the shipping news.
It's also the red wine I have. But you know, I touched on it earlier, but again, just for me, sort of, you know, bringing these like.
Sorry, if you could just bring yourself in. Yeah,
yes,
sorry.
Like just bringing my the multinational upbringing over to Kuwait, and you know, mixing that with my romanticized beliefs of what Kuwait was, and then sort of coming to this country that you've built up and elevated your whole life and just thinking they would accept you, with open arms
Yeah.
for, I'm the national and you're my country and I'm just going to slot right back into it. And then when you move back to a place where you don't really speak the language, you don't understand the inside jokes, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden those people look at you and you're like, but you're one of us. Why don't you talk, think, and look like us? And then you're just like, but I am one of you. Why don't you see that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was honestly the hardest one.
Yeah, because then you don't really know your place in sort of the world. But I guess as someone who's international, anyway, you must feel that sort of when you go from place to place that you're.
I mean, I don't, when you ask me if I have a home, quote unquote, like I just say that I have a Kuwaiti passport and that's the only thing I've got.
Yeah.
You're a post-geographical.
Exactly.
People.
Hey.
Yeah.
But there are people that enjoy that way of living.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you never really belong to one place. And life is just a series of stints in different places that you just pick up and absorb and sponge from and just move on with it.
There's a comedian that I've heard who goes on a famous podcast, and he talks about how he doesn't have a home. He only has a lockup with all his sort of somewhat possessions, and just travels around the world doing comedy. He goes to Asia all the time, which is huge, in China for Western comics to go over there. Because they've got more access to the internet, they can see these people, so that's why they're becoming big stars over there.
And
it's expats is the biggest demographic in China for American comics.
Yeah, interesting.
Is there like a comedy scene? Like obviously, if there's no drinking, would that coincide with a comedy scene in Kuwait?
I don't actually partake in it, but I know that there are improv acts.
Really?
And
Wow.
Wow.
No, Kuwait has a very dynamic social, sphere, and everything from farmers markets to comedy shows to
Wow.
Cool.
to art shows. There's quite a lot going on. So,
but it would probably be a certain brand of comedy with it, because you're not allowed to talk about certain things. Like,
I wish I could provide further detail, but having never been to any,
because a lot of comedy is like satire,
Exactly.
political satire, but you wouldn't really be able to do that.
I'm not sure how they would veil it, but
I mean, if you want to be a comedian, regardless of where you're from, don't go to LA and you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Go to somewhere like that, and you can't say anything disgusting, and everyone is sober, and you would get so good so quickly because you have to actually be
funny.
Yeah,
you're not just relying on effing and jeffing.
So much traffic today.
The 401 was terrible.
The 401,
Yep.
Definitely lived in Toronto. Yeah.
There's a 401 in Kuwait, so you're wrong.
Oh, is there?
No,
There is not. I'm sorry.
Survey says
There's a 40, but not a 401.
A 40.
A 40.
Yes.
Not a 40 ounce. They don't like that.
So is the main language in Kuwait is Arabic?
The official language is Arabic, and pretty much everyone speaks English.
Okay.
Signs are bilingual, etc.
And was that determined by obviously being a Muslim sort of country? Arabic is the language obviously that you're going to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that was in the country before? Maybe because has it always been a Muslim country?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's always been Arabic that was spoke there.
Yeah.
Spoken.
That's correct. Spoken there. Yes.
Spoke there.
Spock.
I can't.
Is actually named
Spock. I cannot speak English. I'm an international English speaker.
An international alleged speaker of English.
I wouldn't say that. It's good though. It's definitely been good to sort of get that perspective. The opposing views. Obviously, you're North American. I'm
North
Scottish
American
/ British, and you're Middle Eastern.
I liked
And
how
everywhere else.
smoke came out your ears when he said British. That was cool.
We just need someone who's from. You said you went to Japan actually.
Went to where?
Japan and
Japan.
China. Did you go to China?
I did. I spent a week in Shanghai.
What
Nice.
did you think of? Because I've had friends who've visited China longish stints or
China?
lived there and
Mm-hmm.
really had a hard time.
Were
In terms
were
of
they girls?
50-50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they were half girl, half guy.
Yes. But
Whoa,
left
man.
right, which is weird. Yeah. No. A couple girls and a couple guys.
Okay.
Yeah. And just had massive culture shock, basically more than I've heard from friends who have lived in other places in Asia or anywhere else.
China was my first, as far as going into the Far East, if you will.
Yeah.
goes, China was the furthest east I'd been to before I went to Japan and Korea. So when I went, like, Shanghai was really sort of disconcerting to be in, just because China is such a vast country and the numbers there are absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And in so many ways, Shanghai sort of is what New York was in the 50s. So
Okay.
it's the big city where all the, you know, the people from the Chinese countryside will sort of come to make it big and
Okay.
Right.
just surround
okay.
themselves by
Yeah.
this development.
So it's symbolic in a nature for the rest of China as well.
Yes, exactly. But I think one of the most jarring things for me in being in Shanghai was, despite it being sort of an international hub where a lot of people come together for a lot of different things, was just the fact that somehow it remained so disconnected and just sort of had these weird things about it. Like, for example, when I showed up at the hotel, you know, I think we arrived at 3 a.m. So someone in our group asked if the bar was open.
Yeah.
So the person at the reception, you know, who welcomes you with, you know, hello, welcome to the hotel. You
Yeah.
are in room 123.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's like, do you have a bar? And then the person was like, yes, the bar is open. And then she's like, yes, but from what time? And the person's like, yes, we have a bar. But then, like, you can sort of see that these people are sort of programmed.
Pre-programmed
Exactly.
to what
Yeah,
they
And
can.
when you
then
ask
if
them a
it
question
goes-
that they don't understand
They
within
can't-
the
if you-
program logic, it just
If you
does not
go
compute.
off
Yeah.
script, it's like call centers for
Yeah.
British companies, because
Oh.
they're across different sort of continents. We had the Philippines, and then it was South Africa, and for the same company.
Yeah.
And then when the time went on, it was in like South America.
Mm-hmm.
We got to know very well, depending on what time we called, who
It was
we would
Talk
get.
Talk.
Talk.
Terrible.
Never.
Talk are
never.
terrible. See, if everything goes smoothly from when you order the internet from the website to your router arriving, and there's no problems with hooking it up,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yes.
But if there's any
If anything
issue,
goes wrong.
Yeah.
anything,
then you're
the
done.
smallest thing, is people who are not in this country who don't understand the sort of, like you say, if you go off script, they just
They have
don't
no
understand
idea.
it. They don't
Yeah.
understand it. And it's not their fault. It's just,
Mhm.
you know, you shouldn't
No.
put your fucking like call centers in a country that doesn't understand. Like BT, like when we were talking about,
yeah.
they were trying to explain that BT had to come out and fix the phone line because BT owns all the phone lines in the UK.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were trying to tell people this back, like in different areas in the world, they just didn't understand what BT was.
Yeah.
And
And
it was just, you couldn't explain it. You know,
it's like,
there's
well,
no
it is
way.
how we're supposed to be getting your service.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah. But it was great. So, long story short, we spent 3 months on the phone with Talk. Never got the internet from them.
3 months, no internet.
That's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
And
Yeah.
it was because they didn't want to pay for a BT technician to come out
Yeah.
and sort like the box right there. It was just connecting a wire together.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah. But it hadn't been done the first time, and no one would come out and do it.
Yeah.
And,
How did we get
honestly.
onto that? Actually, you were talking about China.
China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shanghai. China. I'm saying
Shanghai.
that like a
China.
Trump.
Yeah.
China.
Oh. Thanks for
But yeah, so there's that like veneer of internationality, and then below that,
you know, just not far
fully
below.
up to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it just Shanghai you went to?
It was just Shanghai and the surrounding area,
Okay.
but you know, just the language barrier was huge.
Yeah.
And, you know, even just sort of simple things, if you will, like eating. You know, like just going around from restaurant to restaurant trying to find something. You know, that not necessarily, you know, that you want to venture so far outside your comfort zone, but just it's really hard.
Yeah.
And just because China has such a strong sort of identity, and of course they're coming out of their own sort of dark past of you know all the famine and starvation and hardship
Yeah.
that they suffered. So there's a lot of sort of things that just sort of carry through.
Yeah.
Now, when you pair that with all the extreme wealth that's being pumped into the country, again, you have just this dissonance between
Yeah.
these two very different worlds.
Yeah. Well, that's from the talking about, because we were talking a little bit the other day about Japan's taste in wine, because it seems like Japan is super into like really like natural wines to an extent that I think even still Westerners find pretty off-putting.
And even China was buying up massive
yeah,
amounts
China-
of cheap red wine.
Cheaper,
You know,
but
that-
also like top
Yeah.
range,
Yeah.
Mhm.
like Bordeaux, like that kind of like really showing off wine basically as well.
Mr. Miyagi.
Ayo.
So,
So,
yeah.
but basically, yeah, like I feel like for me, the thin edge of the wedge in my starting to appreciate the crazy spread in kind of wealth from have so much to have nothing. And China was actually their wine importation and the crazy stuff that people can and want to get their hands on versus like just extremely bad situations. Still, it's interesting. Yeah. And like a lot of the as I understand it, this could be completely wrong, but the most widely
You're
grown...
wrong. Never.
This is broken telephone, though. This is like something someone told me.
You mean Chinese whispers?
But that, which is not an expression they have in Canada.
Is an expression here.
Yeah, we got that in school too.
That is so. When I first heard that in Ireland, I was like, you can't say that. But that China's wine consumption has directly influenced the worldwide, mostly like most planted grape situation has changed because of China's.
And that's just because of the amount of people that are in China consuming wine. There's a higher volume that has to be made for that market.
But I think it's also the extreme economic power of a small group of people as well. It's a bit of both, maybe. But yeah, it's like it seems like they've had a direct influence over. I mean, that's kind of almost getting into monoculture stuff then as well. It's sort of like we've had it before in wine where certain grapes can just get wiped out and then you're done for that. Yeah. I'll always find a way to talk about wine. Sorry.
And how was your experience of Japan? That's the real question. That's why I brought you on here. I just love Japan. So
even though you didn't know
I've never been.
Oh my God, Darren, dude.
It's our
get on a plane.
It's our trip that we're like our big trip we're planning for in about a year probably.
You guys have to let me know because I'm thinking about like I'm planning to go back around September.
Dude, let's do it. Yeah. I mean, we want to do Thailand as well, like Chiang Mai. It's supposed to be like legit. I've got a few sort of professional friends out there through the podcast and people who work in. Your friend? No, I met them through being in a certain profession, you know. So, master wanker, I met them. No, I'm joking. So yeah, like I've got a few friends out there. So, Chiang Mai, I want to go there and obviously go see Japan and Tokyo and Osaka and all these places. I have a friend who lives in Beijing, so I'm not sure if we're going to go there or not.
I think that might be another trip for me. That's I'm not as fussed.
Hong Kong. I'd love to go to Hong Kong.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, Hong Kong for sure. I'd like to go.
Yeah.
To.
I also have a friend who lives in Beijing, so if you're, we have to share calendars.
Do you know that there's 14 million bikes in Beijing? Or billion? Is it billion?
Million.
A million is it?
More bikes than I can count in Beijing because there's more than 4 bikes in Beijing.
So yeah, what was your perception of Japan when you were there?
Listen, I mean, I personally speaking, Japan has always been my dream destination. So like,
it's the same for me.
Really?
Yeah, it's always just been the one that's if I go there, it's because it's a big part of my sorry to interject, but it's a big part of my youth was the sort of dichotomy between the US and Japan in a lot of movies. Like sci-fi is so hugely infiltrated with the idea of Japan mixing with the American ideals. It's just this mashing together of the East and the West, and it's just I've seen America, and now I want to really see the opposing sort of view of that, which is Japan and then Japanese culture.
I think for me, like Japan, being a dream destination, I remember being on the plane going there, finally being in the situation where I'm like, it's going to happen. Yeah. So, I went there with all these sky high expectations, and my biggest fear was just I was inevitably going to be disappointed by some component.
Right, okay.
Being in Japan, and I was there for 2 weeks, it blew every single expectation I had out of the water. And it is far and away the greatest country I have been to on this planet.
Wow.
Like here's the thing.
And why is that? Like,
I mean, everything they do is just, every little thing is just a little bit better in some way that you would never have, conceived. Like
you said with the carousel, with the
baggage pointing towards you. Like, there's and I think what distinguishes Japan from the rest of the world is there's a mindfulness that is just put into everything that they do, because they realize, this is just my experience and my own interpretation of it. The Japanese live in a world that exists around them. So they are part of a greater system. And it's not just you rumbling through the world doing your thing, but you exist in a world where other people and other things simultaneously exist.
Huh.
So you have a presence and your actions influence the world around
So
you.
still like a sort
Cool.
of somewhat Buddhist sense of the world. They've still got this sort of Zen Tao
Perhaps.
sort of like you're
Interesting.
connected with the
Yeah.
world, and
I mean, like, I took the Tokyo Metro quite a lot, and obviously it's this gigantic network that, I think 25 million people a day just zip around through it. And,
just
there-
like that, you
yeah,
know.
and just
Fish
there's,
Fest Wash.
and there's pictures, for example, on the, like, through the stations that say good manners, good Tokyo. And it says, if you're walking around with your suitcase, just keep it close to you, just to let people move more easily.
Wow.
And my favorite one was there are screens inside, like, all of the train cars,
Yeah.
which basically say, if you are listening to music on your headphones, just kindly turn down the volume so that the sound leakage doesn't disturb
Yeah.
the people around you. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like they're just taking all of these things into
Yeah.
account.
It feels like communism, how it should work.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
like
like
polite.
Yeah, polite
Yeah.
and sort
Yeah.
of not like
Yeah.
like a dictator telling you what should be happening. It's
Yeah,
Absolutely.
just
don't
like
beat
just-
up your granny
is,
if you don't
is
do
the
it.
commune
Yeah.
the communism is like the greater good is what it's all for, you know.
Exactly.
You're all
Yeah.
there.
Because I think we all are aware that we are all connected and stuff if we want to think about it, but we
Yeah.
don't like to. It's hard, and I think we're, especially in the West, there's this focus on
The
you have to
individual.
be individualistic
Yeah.
to be successful and stuff like that. And as
And
someone
that's
who's
capitalism.
super individualistic, but yeah.
Like you can only if you can consume as an individual, that's more money for the companies.
yeah.
If you're consuming as a whole society, then that is not the same amount of numbers
Yeah.
that's going into that.
Yeah. And I also think in terms of like our interest in Japanese culture and your experience there and a few other of my friends who have been there, I think there's a certain proportion of people in the world who we just really like attention to detail. We don't even really care what it's about.
Yeah.
We just like that it's happening. I don't really mind what genre it's in. I just really, 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 really like it.
And it comes across to me that old school mentality, and I think the British had this at one point, was no matter where you're from and what job you're doing, you're going to do it as best as you can. Maybe not to the same extent, and they're almost compulsive in their nature with some of the things that they do, and just even small tasks. The Japanese, everything's taken with great care and trying to perfect it. And I'm generalizing, but the British used to be like that. There was that kind of sense of like you're the working man and you're going to do your job as best as you can, regardless of how much you're getting paid and where you are in your life.
Yeah. I think that's a kind of another symptom of maybe like scaled up, like post-capitalist kind of, not that Japan isn't super successful capitalistically, but I think there's this sense that in the West, and I'm not sure where else, that if you are not explicitly being paid to do the thing that you're doing, that you're basically stealing from yourself.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is the place I work. I have to do X, Y, and Z on this checklist. I am not employed to look after these other things. It affects the place I work, but fuck it, because if I'm not making money doing this, then I'm basically losing.
Yeah.
Which is an ugly attitude, and it's hard to get away from. It's like when you get these adversarial, like employer-employee relationships.
Like even, I don't know how true this is, but it's one you hear about often, is if you're sleeping at your job as a Japanese person, like that's encouraged because it seems like you're working hard. And that's the idea that they take of people falling asleep at their desk.
Yeah, it's that you're there because you're
working on,
exhausted
yeah,
'cause
and
you've
you're
been
doing
there.
your work.
Yeah.
And it's a different attitude. I mean, I just want to go there so bad.
Well, I mean, there, especially for someone who was shaped by the U.S., for example, looking specifically at tipping.
Yeah.
All right, and how tipping is such a big thing in the U.S. and in Japan, it is frowned upon to tip because when you tip someone, you're basically implying that they're not doing their job well.
Right.
So the Japanese look at it sort of holistically, like if I do my job, I need to be compensated for the job that I'm doing, and I don't need to be topped up
Yeah.
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
So if I deliver 100%, I don't need anything else.
Yeah, like if you have to tip me, then something is wrong in
There
the
you go.
system somewhere. Whereas in the States, it's like people literally do not make minimum wage. So you as a customer are basically blackmailed into tipping because
exactly.
the company won't do it, like, which is
and
insane.
it's the forced niceness in the US as well. Like you're forced to be nice because you're held
hunting for it.
hostage.
Yeah.
Right.
You're held hostage
Yeah.
by not making enough money, so that you have to get tips.
Yeah.
And it's this veneer of niceness. Whereas Japan, it's like they may not outwardly show like a lot of sort of emotion.
Might not be effusive.
Yeah, but they're showing their dedication.
But they have to
Yeah.
deliver, exactly, because
Yeah.
it is something that,
Within
that
them.
they drive.
within
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think the dark side, especially of the tipping culture in the States, is like, okay, so you are blackmailed into being nice to somebody, and you're also blackmailed into continuing to do that if they like try and touch your butt or whatever, because you might
tried that
actually
once.
end up losing money because you got mad at somebody trying to feel you up. Basically, if they don't tip you and you're required to tip out your coworkers,
Yeah. And if someone tried it to
it
you,
could cost
they
you
could
money.
lose a hand.
That is also true.
You would bite them.
I would definitely bite them. No, that's what the core of it works for.
Yeah.
It's for getting wine out of bottles and also stabbing people. Yeah. No, doesn't happen at my work, fortunately.
Yeah, it's definitely a culture that I want to visit. I mean, I've read so much. I think it's been intertwined in my life so much from a young age.
Listen, Japan, I cannot stress it enough. I mean, the fly in the ointment is they eat whale.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that one's the
A
but
dolphin.
we cannot.
yeah,
We can avoid
yeah,
doing
like
that.
we can,
Yeah.
we could overlook that just because everything else is just so damn
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
wonderful. So,
Yeah.
There's a great documentary that it's sort of like more about the old, like you talked about with Kuwait. There's this old school part of Kuwait, and then there's the up and coming sort of newer generation and the millennials that are sort of have a different outlook and a different direction for what they think Kuwait should go down. But in Japan, it's with sake, and it's the last sort of traditionally made sake. Well, one of the very few. I'm not sure if it's the last. I think there's less than like 1,000 traditional.
There's a few, but very few. Yeah.
And these guys, it's a seasonal job, so you work for like 9 months or 6 months
Yeah.
doing this job
But, like,
in the
20
in
hours
the
a
winter,
day.
like, and it's constant. You
Yeah.
live with like a bunch of other guys, and you're constantly just making the sake. Everything you do in your for day-to-day life is towards the sake, and it's this traditional way of making it at odds with a modern Japan.
yeah.
And it was them sort of talking about that later on, and they were sort of saying that wine, like I think one of the most eye-opening and amazing parts of the documentary is when one of the young guys lets the old sake maker taste wine, and he's like, ugh, like he's never tasted wine before.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
and as someone who's Japanese and his taste buds are completely different because he's been brought up a different way. He's
Right.
drinking sake.
But a lot of other than the sort of specificity of the rice, a lot of the making is actually pretty similar in some ways.
But it's an expression of their taste, though. Like their taste buds are not. Wine's not an expression of how they taste.
Oh yeah,
things.
no, I just mean
Yeah.
I found it really interesting because I could understand how they were making it based on wine, but for that then to be so alien is fascinating. Yeah, because it's all the same. Like wine, it's always like you're always like wringing your hands about yeasts and stuff like that, and it was the same.
And they get into sort of the younger Japanese generation are now drinking whiskey and all.
Yeah.
Gin's like a massive thing as well, but they're just saying there's no room for the old traditional harsh taste of sake.
Yeah, that they're developed. Yeah, it's and again with the natural wine thing in Japan, like that almost is somewhere in the middle because you do get really different sort of sets of aromas and flavors from natural wine, and especially like with certain. They like apparently I read this that there is a fault in wine known as mousiness, which not even that many people necessarily can perceive. So it's quite weird. I think they said only about 30% of winemakers can even perceive it. And it might be something they don't quite know where it comes from. They've identified like a few strains that contribute to it. But ostensibly it renders wine kind of nearly undrinkable.
Really?
You can't taste it initially, but it like develops and it's like
Wow.
I think experienced it a couple times, and it's kind of like a puppy breath thing to me. It's this weird, like, stale thing.
He doesn't love
but
puppy breath.
That if a winemaker discovers that they have a mousy batch of wine, that they send it to Japan because they like it. And I don't know if that's true
Japan
or
loves
not.
puppies and
Puppies are great.
anime and And there's like the two opposing sort of dichotomies within Japan itself. There's this sort of upfront business, everything's like got to be 100% well done.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this seedy underbelly that's a reflection of the sort of their inability to move out of their cultural views.
I think. Sorry. Actually.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm just thinking.
I actually drew similarities to Kuwait with that. Because,
really?
Because with Japan, because they have such rigid ways and methods and things that they need to do, because this is just what you do.
Mm-hmm.
When you have that sort of extremity, when you'll have this counter reaction of just something else that just springs up on the far end of the on the opposite end of the spectrum. So just like in Kuwait, for example, where you can't drink and you have to perform and act a certain way. All of a sudden, what is forbidden suddenly becomes all the more enticing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, these people who need to pray 5 times a day, et cetera, will be the hardest drinkers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So in Japan, like for example, just between the anime and just the sort of the creative universes and these personas and things that people just sort of escape with, this fantasy world that coexists somehow side by side with this incredibly rigid and methodical way of life. I saw that parallel and, and it was fascinating.
Yeah,
for me personally.
It's one of the most interesting things about Japan as well. The dichotomy, like the people on the trains, when they're like touching up young girls on the train, like really pervy sort of situations like that because of their sort of restrictiveness, and this is how they sort of lash out. There's the vending machines that hand out like used panties and all this sort of thing. It's so strange. It's not something that we can even sort of comprehend.
But I think also because we're so, like, especially again in the West, we're so fascinated by it's the same the way we're fascinated with Victorians, and I think we tend to inflate that dichotomy just because it is really fascinating, but at the same time I don't really know, because there certainly is something to that. I think it's that there's a quote in one of the Dan Carlin podcasts, and he's actually paraphrasing from somebody else, and it was a quote that was originally about Jewish people, but he adapts it to the Japanese and says basically they're just like everybody else, only more so. It's like, great. So theoretically at either end of the spectrum you're getting more, or the thing with my fascination with the attention to detail, like if you're that attentive to detail in your subcultures as well, you're just gonna get some really intense subcultures. Oh, wine for Caesar.
So yeah, it's been great speaking to both of you tonight actually. So if someone's new on the show, I end up finishing the show off with some questions. Not that I haven't asked you questions, but just something, just not like a quick fire round, but just whatever you come out with. So the first question is usually what favorite piece of music, either your favorite album of all time or something that you're listening to.
Oof. Laura, do you want to field this one first?
I've been on the show, man. I've done this already.
Man.
Actually, I haven't done the music one. I think that's a newer one, but I don't.
It's always in there. She doesn't listen.
We've done
I'm joking. You always listen.
Yeah,
you're the only person that listens to this podcast. So
hey,
it's okay. My mom listens to it too.
I'm gonna have 0 listeners on this one because she's on it.
Ugh, music, man. Yikes. I don't know. I've been cycling through a lot of just random, 80s funny things, but coming up here, I think just for the last few days, I've sort of had the Interstellar soundtrack on repeat.
Oh, wow. Cool. Interesting.
So something about just like the creepy, spacey openness, and especially just walking up the streets here. It was dark. I was pretty much the only person.
Yeah.
Thematic to what you're doing. Yeah.
So it was that and Tubular Bells from The Exorcist.
Oh, no way.
So,
Oh boy.
Boom. How's that for interesting?
Are you really trying to freak yourself out?
That was that's troubling, to be honest. No.
And
what is Scotland if not dramatic?
Yeah.
So.
Favorite movie or something that you've seen recently that you enjoyed?
I don't really watch movies. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I've been watching a lot of Archer.
Okay.
And,
Archer.
Yes, excellent. He's Crepuscular. Get him.
Sterling.
Better even than Nebula.
Sterling.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my God, I love
Archer.
Archer.
Right?
Good.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, TV.
So that's TV.
Okay.
Sweet.
Your favorite book?
can't think of a firm favorite, but I have been reading Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Oh, that is a good book.
Right.
That is a
Cool. I
great
haven't
book.
read it,
that is
but that
really
sounds
good.
super
Yeah,
awesome. I
it's
like
one you
that.
have to listen to.
Yeah.
You have to read as well.
And especially as a consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This thing will thoroughly fuck you up.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
That sounds fascinating.
Yep.
Sweet.
100% recommended.
Cool.
The consultant. Is that what they call you?
The sultry
Consultant.
consultant.
Yeah, the
The
sultry
sultry
consultant.
You can call me that, Darren. You can call me whatever you want.
That's what she said.
Love it.
And this is my sort of favorite one to ask because it always puts people on the
It never
spot.
works.
Oh, man.
It never works. Apart from Laura, because she always has a quick quip to sort of say. Favorite quote.
Yikes. No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Sorry.
or one that you've heard or something.
Nope.
Or even a quote from a piece of music or something.
That's a really hard one because it's very psychologically
Yeah.
naked and also really hard to remember.
Yeah. And for me, it's that psychological nudity that's just,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, cannot
Oh.
perform.
What about we do a collective one for the spring break?
Spring
Spring
break.
break.
Spring
Woo!
break. Anyway, man, and lasses, thank you for coming on. It's been absolutely awesome to catch up with you. And anyone that's listening or watching, I will catch you next week. Peace.